Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mr. Storyteller. Before you dive into tonight's nightmare, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax.
Under the slanting glow of a weak autumn moon, the old Halewood house stood silent on the outskirts of a quiet town, a place where whispered rumors of lost souls and restless curses lingered like a thick fog. Many had heard the fragments of its harrowing past, but none dared approach its decrepit door, except for a small group of friends who craved the thrill of confronting what lay beneath. They sought the truth behind the local lore of true scary stories to fall asleep, where night after night, restless dreams had been whispered into the ears of unsuspecting sleepers. Alex, the pragmatic skeptic of the group, chuckled as they parked near the abandoned structure. His best friend, Naya, a fiercely intelligent young woman who possessed an uncanny sense of empathy, felt a creeping sensation in her gut as they approached. With her were Jordan, a quiet but observant artist, and Chris, who hid behind a mask of bravado, yet struggled with long-forgotten childhood nightmares. Their journey was motivated by equal measures of curiosity and daring. A promise had been made to document any unusual experiences that might cross their path. The front door creaked open with an agonizing slowness that seemed to echo through the hallways, and the sound of their footsteps bounced off the moldering wood panels. The dim beam of a flashlight revealed swirling dust and faded portraits that seemed to watch their every move. It was as if the house itself was alive, its very walls saturated with the memories of agony and despair. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" whispered Nia, glancing back at the darkened corridor behind them. Her voice trembled despite her determined eyes. "Probably just the echoes of the past," Alex replied dismissively, though even he could not silence the unease clawing at the edges of his mind. They made their way slowly through the corridor, discovering remnants of lives once lived. A dusty diary on an ancient desk, a shattered mirror strewn with eerie reflections, and a series of paintings whose subjects bore expressions of silent agony. In one room, they found a long-forgotten bedroom with a large, ornate bed draped in moth-eaten lace. The heavy curtains shuddered in the stagnant breeze that seeped through broken windows, making the atmosphere thick with melancholy. As the night deepened, Chris's earlier bravado gave way to a palpable tension. "You know," he murmured, his voice barely audible, "I've read these stories before. They say the spirits in this place never rest. They're waiting, hungry for anyone who dares disturb them." He paused, glancing nervously at the ornate mirror before them. In its cracked surface, a figure loomed for a moment longer than a mere reflection should. It was the shape of a woman, her face twisted in silent anguish, her eyes dark pools of sorrow. "Did you see that?" Jordan asked, his voice shaking with a mix of awe and fear. "No, that can't be," whispered Alex, moving closer to inspect the mirror. Yet the figure had vanished, leaving behind only the fractured fragments of glass and their own trembling reflections. The friends pressed onward until they reached the attic, a small, cramped space enveloped in darkness. The air was thick with dust, and an almost musical creak filled the silence as they ascended the stairs. The attic was cluttered with relics, old trunks, broken toys, and a stack of yellowed newspapers telling tales of misfortune and tragedy. It was clear that many of the objects here once held meaning, now relegated to the pages of a forgotten history. Jordan's flashlight flickered, casting chaotic patterns on the slanted ceiling. His eyes caught sight of a large, hand-bound photo album lying open on a rickety chair. Its pages were filled with faded photographs, smiling children, proud families, and an unidentified young woman whose eyes seemed to plead for recognition. As he turned the pages, a single sentence, scrawled in hurried, almost desperate handwriting, caught his attention. "They come when you sleep, and nothing can stop them." "Listen to this," whispered Nia, as if sharing a secret. It's written in a way that suggests these events were not mere folklore. It's an eyewitness account, a warning. She recited the words with a tremor in her voice that belied her usual poise. "I fear that what's inside these pages is still active, still waiting to be awakened." As if in answer to their mounting fears, a sudden gust of wind swept through the attic, scattering the pages of the album like ghostly confetti. The temperature dropped sharply, and a suffocating darkness seemed to seep in from every corner of the room. Chris's eyes darted around desperately. "We need to leave," he said. Something isn't right here." But before they could retreat, a slow, rhythmic creaking sound emerged from somewhere deep within the house, followed by a whisper that seemed to emanate from every direction. "Stay," it breathed, each syllable laced with sorrow and malice. It was impossible to tell if the voice was real or merely a trick of their terror-stricken imaginations. Alex took a deep breath and tried to steady his trembling resolve. "It sounds like someone is calling for help. We need to check it out," he insisted, though doubt and fear waged war inside him. His practical nature battled against an intuition that screamed for escape. Nia's eyes filled with tears as she softly replied, "Or maybe it's a trap, a call that lures you further into darkness." Yet, despite her inner resistance, the compulsion to uncover the truth was too strong. And so they followed the sound down a narrow passage lined with cobwebs and memories of despair. The air grew heavier with every step, thick with the scent of decay and forgotten time. At the end of the passage, they discovered a small room with a single feeble light emanating from a cracked window. Sitting in the center of the room was a rocking chair, moving slowly back and forth as if pushed by unseen hands. The voice, now clearer, repeated its haunting call. "Help me. Please, help." It was a cry that vibrated with profound anguish, echoing off the walls and resonating deep within their souls. Jordan, who had been silent until then, stepped forward with a mixture of caution and empathy. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice quivering under the weight of the oppressive atmosphere. The rocking chair stilled momentarily, and then, in a burst of static clarity, a translucent figure emerged. A woman with sorrowful eyes, her dress tattered by time. "I'm Anna," the specter managed to whisper, her voice a fragile thread of sound. "I was wronged, and now I'm lost between worlds." The words, fragile and laden with despair, sent shivers down every spine. Alex's skepticism faltered as the image before him blurred the line between reality and nightmare. "Anna, what happened to you?" Naya asked, her voice gentle yet trembling. Anna's eyes, filled with regret, flickered with memories too painful to recount. "I was betrayed by those I trusted. They forced me into silence, into the void. Every night since, I've been left in this limbo, unable to leave, unable to find peace." As Anna spoke, the atmosphere grew inexplicably colder, as if the very act of her remembrance summoned an otherworldly presence. The floorboards creaked under an unseen weight, and a deep, resonating hum vibrated in the corners of the room. Alex, struggling to maintain his composure, tried to reason with the apparent paranormal phenomena. "Anna, if you're here, what is it that you want from us?" Her spectral gaze fell upon Alex, eyes pleading with an intensity that was almost unbearable. "I need you to find the truth, a story buried in time, hidden in the pages of this house. Only by facing the memories of betrayal and unresolved grief can my soul be set free." Her voice echoed, mingling with the oppressive silence that had laid claim to the room. Chris, no longer able to mask his terror, murmured, "But what if we awaken something else?" Anna's face contorted with both sorrow and determination. "Sometimes, to rid the world of a curse, you must first face the darkness inside yourself." With those words hanging in the stale air, the spectral presence receded into the shadows, leaving the friends with a chilling mandate that resonated deeper than any fear they had experienced. Determined to honor Anna's plea, they dove into the scattered remnants of the house's history, uncovering old letters and diaries that told a harrowing tale of deceit, betrayal, and revenge. The accounts painted a picture of a once happy family, torn apart by greed and madness. Each discovery added layers of horror to their understanding. Anna was not the only victim. Unseen forces had molded the very fabric of the house into a prison of lost souls and regrets, a perpetual stage for tragedies that repeated with every passing generation. While poring over the fragile documents by the light of a flickering candle, Nia suddenly realized that the narrative paralleled not only the history of the house, but also a line in a diary entry that read, "The hauntings are the echoes of our own hidden sins." The words struck her with an eerie sense of inevitability. What if this house isn't just cursed by the actions of the past, but it's also reflecting our own darkness? She questioned, her voice trembling with the weight of the revelation. Before any of them could respond, a sudden clamor erupted from the doorway. The sound of shattering glass and hurried footsteps threw the room into turmoil. The friends scattered in panic as the wind began to whistle an otherworldly tune through the corridors. In the midst of the chaos, the diary they had been poring over slipped from Jordan's hand and fell open once more. The page revealed a stark warning, scrawled in red ink that dripped like fresh blood. When the past awakens, the future is entombed in shadows. The group reconvened, hearts pounding, uncertain if they were battling ghosts from a cursed history or the demons within themselves. Alex insisted that they needed to leave, but Jordan felt an insatiable compulsion to unearth every dark secret the house held. There's something that wants to be remembered, even if it means facing our worst nightmares, he argued passionately. The argument was cut short by an unnatural roar that reverberated throughout the building, shaking dust off the rafters. The walls seemed to contort, as if unwilling to reveal their secrets without blood. Amidst this cacophony, Chris's eyes widened in terror. I saw them. I saw faces in the darkness, watching us, he stammered, voice barely a whisper against the escalating clamor. Before anyone could react, a presence filled the room, a figure that loomed behind them, ethereal and insidious. It was as if time had fragmented and the tortured souls of the past converged into one embodiment of relentless despair. In a voice that was both sorrowful and commanding, it declared, "You dare to awaken the memories of the dead? You carry with you the sins of your own making." The words were not spoken by any one voice, but echoed as a collective chorus of pain and warning. Each friend felt a deep-seated paralysis, as if their hearts were gripped by frost. The spectral enemy was not just an external threat, it was the nightmare that had been lurking at the edge of every one of their thoughts, waiting for the opportune moment to manifest. With trembling determination, Alex stepped forward. "What do you want from us?" he demanded, his voice breaking through the oppressive silence like a desperate plea for redemption. There was a pause, a heavy moment where the weight of unspoken confessions filled the space. Then, a soft but unyielding reply, "You must acknowledge the darkness within you. Only through understanding can you release the shadows that bind me." The words reverberated in their chests, each syllable penetrating the deepest recesses of their souls. Nia, her eyes brimming with tears but filled with resolve, nodded slowly. "I've been so afraid of my own reflection lately, too afraid to confront the sins of my past," she admitted, voice wavering. "Perhaps we are not just here to help a lost soul, but to free ourselves from our own hidden guilt." Each of them began to share fragments of their own buried secrets, traumatic events long repressed, mistakes that had haunted their consciences. In that long-forgotten attic of despair, the act of vulnerability became a pathway to catharsis. Their voices, broken yet determined, filled the room as they recounted memories that had long been entombed in the recesses of their hearts. The revelation seemed to weaken the spectral presence, as if honesty and self-forgiveness dispelled the oppressive mist of resentment. The figure's form flickered, its once intense malice softening as it absorbed the shared confessions. "Your voices, they are an echo of truth," it murmured, the sound now fragile and intermingled with the gentle cadence of acceptance. "Release the guilt, and you will free the spirit that has been damned by betrayal." In that singular, transformative moment, the stale air of the house shifted imperceptibly. The once insidious whispers were now lost in the murmur of shared revelations and the beating of sincere hearts. The oppressive darkness, which had threatened to suffocate them, began to recede, like an unwelcome tide leaving a forgotten shore. As dawn approached, the first light of day broke through the boarded windows, casting a pale glow that infused the stale halls with a promise of renewal. The friends, their eyes heavy with the weight of newfound understanding, gathered in the once haunted bedroom. Here, amid the remnants of despair, they carefully penned down everything they had uncovered, both the history of Hallowwood House and their own personal journeys of grief and redemption. It was not just a story of a haunted building, but a narrative of the human spirit's capacity for healing. Outside, as the early morning mist lifted, the oppressive aura that had once saturated the estate began to disperse. The ghosts of the past, tethered by unspoken truths and buried regrets, seemed to whisper one final word, a soft benediction that at long last acknowledged the healing power of confession and empathy. Anna's spectral form faded slowly, a bittersweet smile gracing her translucent lips. "Thank you," she whispered, as if her soul, freed from the shackles of vendetta, drifted into a peaceful oblivion. The friends stepped out of Halewood House that day forever changed. They carried with them not only a haunting tale that would chill the hearts of future listeners, but also a deep, abiding lesson. Sometimes our worst nightmares are not the specters that lurk in decaying buildings, but the darkness within our own hearts. In that shared moment of terror and transcendence, they discovered that the way to conquer the past was to face it head on, with courage, compassion, and a willingness to embrace even the most painful truths. As the light of day embraced them, they left behind the mansion that had been both a prison and a sanctuary, its secrets now a part of their own stories. A lingering chill remained, a reminder that the echoes of pain and sorrow can be transformed into a testament to the indomitable strength of the human spirit, a truth that could turn even the most terrifying fables into a catalyst for redemption and hope.
Story number 2.
Under a sky as black as spilled ink, the town of Raven's Hollow lay shrouded in a silence that was at once both eerie and expectant. The locals whispered that the past never truly died here, that it lurked beneath the crumbling facades and beneath the barren, wind-swept fields. Every year as autumn descended, a shadow crept slowly over the land, bringing with it a terror as old as the earth itself. Jonas Reed, a journalist with more curiosity than caution, had come to Raven's Hollow to document the inexplicable events that had plagued the town for decades. His investigation centered on the ruins of St. Bartholomew's Chapel, a once holy sanctuary that, according to legend, had been the site of unspeakable horrors during the long-ago days of the plague and witch hunts. The story was not only a tale of supernatural retribution, but also of forgotten sins and restless spirits seeking absolution. Late one rainy evening, Jonas arrived at the decrepit chapel. The building towered before him, its stone walls covered in creeping ivy, and its bell, now rusted and silent, hung crookedly like a dismembered limb. From beneath the stained glass windows, an oppressive aura seemed to seep out, a portent of despair that set his heart racing. With only a flashlight and a recorder in hand, he stepped through the ruined doorway, determined to capture what the darkness might reveal. The heavy wooden door creaked ominously as it swung shut behind him, leaving Jonas in a cavern of gloomy silence. The interior was dimly illuminated by the erratic flashes of lightning that penetrated the broken windows, revealing rows of empty pews, shattered remnants of religious iconography, and crypts carved into the stone floor. Every step echoed like a lament for lost souls. As he advanced, he felt a subtle vibration beneath his feet, almost as though the building itself was resonating with hidden grief. He paused at the altar, where a scorched Bible lay open, as if abandoned in a moment of desperate prayer. Something about the scene unsettled him. The frantic scribble in the margins of the worn pages, the acrid smell of burnt incense, and a series of cryptic symbols etched into the wood of the lectern. These symbols, Jonas later realized, were not from any known liturgy but bore the mark of a long-forgotten cult rumored to have mingled dark magic with piety. Before he could document further, a gust of wind rattled the broken glass windows, and an otherworldly whisper seemed to rise from the walls themselves. "Remember us," came the quiet plea, barely audible beneath the sound of the storm. Jonas's heart pounded. For a moment he questioned whether his own imagination had betrayed him. Yet as the whisper persisted, an icy dread slithered up his spine, urging him to retreat. He recorded the sound, his hands trembling as he noted its uncanny resonance. Unsure whether the sound was carried by the wind or conjured by unseen forces, Jonas pressed deeper into the chapel. He climbed a narrow spiral staircase leading to the bell tower, where the darkness thickened into palpable malice. Every step was a descent into a realm where time seemed to coil upon itself, memories of agony mingling with the present. When he reached the top, the shattered remains of the bell lay scattered across the floor. Among the debris, a single antique pocket watch glimmered unnaturally in the intermittent light, a relic that must have belonged to one of the chapel's long-departed caretakers. Clutching the watch, Jonas heard it tick softly, a heartbeat in the heavy silence. A disembodied voice, laden with sorrow and malevolence, whispered his name. "Jonas, come closer. Learn our story." The voice was no mere echo. It resonated with the torment of centuries. Heart pounding, he followed the sound down a narrow, hidden passage behind the tower. The passage wound deep below the chapel and opened into a subterranean crypt where stone coffins lay in rows, their surfaces etched with unfamiliar runes. Candles, still flickering though no human hand had lit them in ages, danced on their perimeters, casting ghostly shadows upon the cold walls. In the center of the crypt was a stone sarcophagus, its lid ajar as if inviting Jonas to approach. Driven by an unstoppable mix of horror and compulsion, he drew near. On the sarcophagus's surface was a panel of inscriptions recounting a tale of betrayal and vengeance, a chronicle of a priest who had sacrificed his flock to appease a dark deity promising eternal life. The inscription told of how the souls of the betrayed were trapped, doomed to wander the earth until their sins were confessed and forgiven. The air turned frigid, and suddenly voices began to murmur all around him, each a fragment of a long-forgotten sorrow. "We are the silenced. We are the lost." The voices intertwined, forming a chorus of despair that rattled the ancient stone. Jonas's rational mind wavered under the weight of the spectral lament. He felt invisible eyes upon him, and the shadows seemed to shift with intentionality, assembling into a spectral congregation of anguished figures with hollow eyes and contorted expressions. "Who are you?" Jonas demanded, his voice echoing in the crypt's oppressive stillness. From the midst of the spectral assembly emerged a figure, a woman draped in tattered robes, her presence both terrifying and profoundly sorrowful. Her eyes, deep wells of unhealed agony, locked onto Jonas. "I am Miriam," she intoned in a voice that quivered with both malice and heartbreak, once a priestess of this sanctuary, now condemned to wander these catacombs because of a sin that cannot be expunged. Her words dripped with regret and a ghostly sorrow that seemed to seep into the very marrow of Jonas's bones. "What do you want from me?" he stammered, stepping back as though her spectral gaze might shatter him into a million fragments of fear. "I need you to know our truth," Miriam replied, her hand reaching out as if beckoning him to share in the burden of her eternal penance. "Every soul here is a story of torment, every whisper a truth left unspoken. Come, bear witness to our tale, or be doomed to forget our suffering in your own life." Before Jonas could protest, the entire crypt seemed to convulse with the energy of countless unspoken grievances. The air trembled with the unrelenting echo of pain as images flooded his mind, visions of a time when fervor and fanaticism blurred the line between salvation and damnation. He witnessed the memories of old rituals performed by desperate men and women, sacrifices made in the name of power and survival, and the lingering curse that bound them to this forsaken place. Images of the repentant priest weeping amidst his sacrificial altar, of mothers cradling children stolen by the darkness, and of the very stones of the chapel bleeding with the spilled hope of generations filled Jonas with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Somehow he understood that his presence was not accidental. He had been drawn here to unravel the twisted legacy of guilt and redemption. "Who will remember us if not you?" Miriam whispered, her spectral voice now trembling like a dying ember. "I see in you a hunger for truth, a thirst that might break this cycle of torment. Our secrets demand justice, forgiveness, and a reckoning. In your words, we might finally find peace." Summoning every ounce of courage, Jonas set up his equipment and began recording everything. Miriam's spectral lament, the echo of ancient prayers, and the chilling recount of a history steeped in blood and sorrow. As the night wore on, the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred. The crypt itself began to breathe, its cold stone walls pulsating with the residual energies of lost souls. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed from above, as if the very structure of the chapel protested against the unearthing of its darkest chapters. The candles sputtered and died, plunging Jonas into an inky void. In the depths of that darkness, he felt the touch of unseen hands, cold and insistent, guiding him further into the labyrinth of sorrow beneath the chapel. An overwhelming voice arose, a chorus of hundreds of voices, each crying out, "Remember, remember." It was a dirge for the damned, a relentless reminder of the sins that bound them. Tears of terror and remorse mixed on Jonas's cheeks as he whispered, "I will remember. I promise." In that moment, the oppressive weight in the crypt lightened ever so slightly, as though the confession of his own faults had momentarily appeased the spectral assembly. Miriam's sorrowful smile was tinged with gratitude, yet even that small sign of relief was transient. The curse that had haunted Raven's Hollow was older than anyone's soul, and its hold was far from broken. When dawn's pale light crept over the horizon, Jonas emerged from St. Bartholomew's Chapel, a changed man. His tapes and notes were filled with accounts of unspeakable sorrow and a glimpse into the torment of centuries. With trembling hands, he compiled his report, aware that it held the weight of not only the past but a dire warning for the future. The voices of the lost echoed in every line, a testament to a legacy of violence and penitence that demanded acknowledgement. After publishing his account, Jonas received both acclaim and scorn. Some hailed his work as a courageous dive into history's darkest corners, while others dismissed his experiences as the overactive imagination of a man too enchanted by tragedy. But as time passed, the story of the haunted chapel and the tormented souls of Raven's Hollow began to seep into the collective memory of the town. In hushed tones, the older residents recounted strange events. A flickering light in the window of an abandoned building here, a sorrowful whisper along the wind there, signs that the spirits had not been entirely silenced. Late one winter evening, as Jonas sat alone in his modest apartment reflecting on all he had witnessed, a familiar chill swept through the room. The antique pocket watch he had retrieved from the chapel began to tick once more, its sound resonating with a spectral beat that seemed to pull him back into that labyrinth of lost souls. A soft, sorrowful voice echoed around him. "Remember us." It was a reminder that some truths, once unearthed, were never truly laid to rest. In that final moment of quiet terror, Jonas realized that his journey was far from over. The legacy of Raven's Hollow was woven into his life now, compelling him to continue seeking out the stories of those forgotten by time. Even as the modern world tried to silence the cries of the past, the ghosts of St. Bartholomew's Chapel would forever whisper their truths into the ears of those daring enough to listen. And as long as the memory of those lost souls endured in every trembling heartbeat, the curse of Raven's Hollow would persist. A silent, chilling reminder that some histories are too painful, too potent to be erased.
Story number 3.
In the depths of a forgotten rural valley, where fog clung to the crooked boughs of bears in the wind whispered secrets to those brave enough to listen, there stood a mansion with a legacy as dark as the night itself. The Holloway estate, once the grand residence of a prosperous family, now languished in decay. Local legend told of untimely deaths, tragic betrayals, and a malevolent presence that refused to leave its confines. It was said that on certain nights, one could hear the desperate cries of lost souls echoing through its crumbling halls. Mara Ellison had spent years chasing mysterious phenomena as an independent researcher. After discovering a series of cryptic letters in an abandoned library archive, she became obsessed with the mansion's history. The letters hinted at hidden chambers, secret rituals, and a vengeful spirit known only as the Mourner. Driven by equal parts curiosity and determination, Mara set off for Holloway Estate with a small backpack, a tape recorder, and a notebook to document every detail. She was not one for superstition, but the persistent rumors of eerie, unexplained events sent a ripple of both excitement and dread through her heart. On a chilly, overcast evening, Mara's battered Jeep rumbled up the long, winding drive that led to the mansion. As the vehicle halted at the wrought iron gate, now rusted and half consumed by ivy, an oppressive silence enveloped her. The estate loomed ahead, its once proud facade shrouded in tangled shadows. A single dim light flickered near the main entrance, a beacon of uncertainty in the darkness. Stepping out of the vehicle, Mara's boots crunched on broken gravel as she approached the enormous oak door. The structure itself seemed to breathe a palpable malevolence, as though the walls held memories of sorrow and pain. With a deep, steadying breath, she pressed her hand against the cold, scarred wood and pushed the door open. It moaned in protest, reverberating throughout an expansive foyer draped in tattered velvet drapes and littered with remnants of a bygone era. "Hello?" Mara called, her voice small against the vast backdrop of silence. For a long moment, only the sound of her own nervous heartbeat filled the space. Then, from somewhere deep within the mansion, came the faint echo of footsteps, deliberate, measured, and impossibly slow. Clutching her recorder tightly, Mara followed the sound down a long corridor lined with portraits of solemn ancestors whose eyes seemed almost to follow her every movement. The atmosphere was heavy with neglect, as if the very air carried the weight of countless tragedies. Every step echoed ominously, blending with the distant sound of weeping, barely audible, as if coming from far away. It was the kind of sound that burrowed into one's soul, a cry of despair that refused to be ignored. Mara reached a grand staircase that spiraled upward into darkness. The sound of soft, almost mournful footsteps continued from above. She hesitated at the foot of the stairs, wondering if her determination might be guiding her into something far more sinister than she had ever anticipated. Yet, with heart pounding, she ascended, the ancient wood creaking underfoot as if whispering warnings in a forgotten tongue. At the top of the stairs, she found herself at the entrance to a long hallway. The wallpaper, once vibrant and opulent, was now peeling, revealing the scars of time. Her light caught a door slightly ajar at the far end of the hall. Drawn to the mystery, Mara walked toward it, her recorder still capturing every sound. As she reached the door, she could almost feel an icy breath on her neck, and she spun around, half expecting to find someone standing behind her. There was no one, only the echoing silence. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open and stepped into a parlor that appeared frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the flicker of her flashlight beam, and antique furniture lay draped in sheets like ghosts awaiting resurrection. In one corner sat an old phonograph, its horn tarnished and silent. Mara's eyes were drawn to a large mirror hanging on the wall. Its surface was marred by cracks, distorting her reflection into a faceless silhouette. Then, as if summoned by the echo of her own fear, a whisper slid from the darkness. "Stay. Please stay." The words were barely audible, yet resonated with a sorrow that chilled her to the core. "Who's there?" Mara demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. For a split second, the mirror flickered, and the faint outline of a woman appeared behind her in its fractured reflection, a spectral figure cloaked in tattered garments, eyes downcast and wet with unseen tears. Mara spun around, heart hammering, but the room remained empty, save for shadows that danced with her light. Summoning every ounce of courage, she addressed the empty room. "If you need help, speak up," she said, her tone a mixture of defiance and empathy. Silence answered her for a few breathless moments, and then, as if emerging from the depths of memory, the figure materialized with agonizing slowness near the phonograph. The woman's voice was soft and laden with despair. "I am Evelyn. I have waited so long. I cannot leave." Her spectral form trembled in the pale glow of Mara's flashlight as she approached with arms outstretched. "Why are you trapped here?" Mara asked, her scientific mind racing to rationalize what she was witnessing. Was this a lingering soul, or merely a trick of light and shadow? Evelyn's eyes, now almost human in their sorrow, met Mara's gaze. "I was betrayed by those I loved. In a moment of madness, my own kin sealed my fate here through ritual and deceit. I was condemned, forsaken in this house of misery." As Evelyn spoke, the temperature in the room plummeted. The shadows in the corners deepened and seemed to writhe as if alive. Mara recorded every word, each syllable a haunting lament of eternal sorrow. "Tell me your story," she urged softly, though her heart thudded in terror. Evelyn's ghostly form led Mara across the parlor to a wall lined with faded photographs. The images, once full of life and laughter, now appeared to be racked with despair. In one photograph, a young woman with a gentle smile and bright eyes stood next to a man whose eyes were cold and calculating. Another showed a similar couple, but the woman's expression was twisted into one of terror, and the man's face was shadowed by malevolence. "They made me an offering," Evelyn whispered, her voice echoing off the chipped plaster walls. "The ritual was meant to grant them prosperity and longevity, but it cursed me to wander these halls, trapped between life and death." Mara's pulse quickened with the realization that she was peering into a tale older and more sorrowful than any urban myth. The story was imbued with a palpable sense of injustice and regret. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Any way to free you from this endless torment?" Evelyn's eyes, deep and forlorn, shimmered with a trace of hope. "There is. A relic hidden within these walls, a locket that contains the truth of my innocence. It was stolen from me on that fateful night, and only by restoring it can my soul be freed. But be warned, finding it means confronting the darkest parts of these walls and the secrets they hold." Determined to help, Mara promised, "I will find it, Evelyn. I will uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be." Evelyn's form wavered as if in relief, and for a brief instant, a whisper of gratitude filled the room. The ghost's image slowly faded into the darkness, leaving Mara with an aching sense of duty and dread. Over the next several hours, Mara meticulously searched the mansion. She retraced Evelyn's ethereal steps, examining forgotten drawers, crumbling bookshelves, and hidden alcoves. In one narrow passageway behind a collapsed portion of the wall, she uncovered a small wooden box, intricately carved with patterns that echoed the sinister rituals of old. Inside, wrapped in a faded satin cloth, lay a tarnished silver locket. As soon as her fingers brushed against it, a shudder ran through the mansion, and the silence was shattered by the anguished wail of 1,000 voices. The sound rattled the very foundations of the estate. Mara clutched the locket tightly, her mind racing with questions and terror. Every corridor seemed to echo with the cries of sorrow. With the locket in hand, she retraced her steps back to the parlor where she last saw Evelyn. As she entered, the spectral figure reappeared before her, but this time her expression was one of tentative hope. Is that my locket?" Evelyn asked, her tone trembling with disbelief. The air around them shimmered with an otherworldly energy as Mara held the locket out. "Yes," Mara replied, her voice hushed. "I believe this holds the truth that can free you." In an instant, the room filled with an incandescent light. The locket flung itself from Mara's grasp, spinning through the air like an enchanted talisman. It burst open, releasing a cascade of memories that filled the room, a montage of moments long forgotten. Mara's eyes widened as she saw through the locket's visions. A night of revelry turned to horror, a family united only to be torn apart by envy and malice. Then a heart-wrenching scene in which a gentle soul was betrayed by those who should have loved her. Tears streamed down Evelyn's spectral face as the truth unfolded. "It wasn't my fault," Evelyn cried, her voice resonating with both regret and a newfound resolve. "I was forced into this destiny by those blinded by greed and ambition. They sacrificed me so they could seize my fortune, my power. They believed that condemning me would curse the estate, binding prosperity to their bloodline. Instead, they damned me to a purgatory of endless suffering." The room, now filled with the raw energy of confession and truth, trembled as if responding to the catharsis. Mara watched, transfixed, as the images in the locket shifted from a dark past to a glimmer of redemption. The oppressive atmosphere softened as the hidden layers of guilt and resentment were exposed. Evelyn's form began to change, no longer the anguished spirit of sorrow, but a figure of quiet dignity, her eyes alight with the possibility of peace. "The locket is the vessel of my truth," Evelyn murmured. "I must place it in the sacred chamber beneath the estate where all misdeeds were once hidden away. There, the curse that binds me can finally be unraveled." Mara, though trembling from the ordeal, steeled herself for what lay ahead. Guided by the spectral presence of Evelyn, she descended through a labyrinth of long-forgotten passageways to a hidden chamber carved deep into the foundation of the mansion. The chamber was narrow, its walls rough-hewn from cold stone, lit by the faint glow of phosphorescent fungi that clung to damp crevices. At its center stood a stone pedestal, its surface etched with arcane symbols that pulsated with an ancient energy. "Place it here," Evelyn urged softly from the darkness behind Mara. With shaking hands, Mara set the locket upon the pedestal. For several long moments, nothing happened except the sound of her own ragged breathing. Then the chamber roiled with an eerie light. The symbols on the pedestal glowed an intense blue, and the very air vibrated with power. A deep, sonorous voice, as if emanating from the earth itself, recited incantations that resonated with both sorrow and hope. Mara watched in awe as a spectral vortex emerged before her eyes, a swirling maelstrom of memories and regrets. The vortex lifted Evelyn's spirit, drawing her closer to the pedestal. With each heartbeat, the oppressive weight that had clung to the mansion for decades began to lift. Evelyn's form glowed with a soft radiance as her tortured visage slowly relaxed, tears of liberation streaming down her ethereal face. "Thank you," the spirit whispered, her voice echoing with 1,000 voices finally at rest. "I can finally leave this place and join those who have long since found peace." The echo of her gratitude hung in the chamber, reverberating off the ancient stones. Outside, as the first streaks of dawn crept across the sky, Mara emerged from Holloway Estate forever changed. The mansion, now bathed in the gentle light of morning, seemed less oppressive, a place where the echoes of suffering had finally been acknowledged and perhaps forgiven. Yet, as Mara drove away along the winding country road, she could still feel the weight of the estate's tragic history in her soul. The whispers of the past had been released, but their memory would remain etched in the annals of time, a reminder of the cost of betrayal and the redemptive power of truth. In the months that followed, Mara's recordings and journals of Holloway Estate captivated audiences far and wide. Her detailed accounts of the spectral encounters, the hidden relic, and the cathartic ritual resonated with those who had long harbored their own ghosts. People spoke in hushed tones of the once cursed mansion that now stood as a monument to healing, a testament to the idea that even in the darkest corners of history, there lay a glimmer of hope for redemption. Yet, on certain moonless nights, in the quiet stillness before the break of dawn, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper could be heard by those who dared to venture near the grounds. The voice, faint and sorrowful, seemed to float on the cool night air, a promise that the truth once unearthed would echo on in the hearts of the living. And as the wind rustled through the overgrown ivy and the old oak trees, some swore that they could glimpse a figure, bathed in a gentle luminescence, wandering peacefully along the garden path, an enduring reminder that even the darkest curses can be broken with the light of truth and forgiveness.
Story number 4.
In the far reaches of a barren, windswept landscape lay Westwood Asylum, a decrepit relic of a time when cruelty and fear masqueraded as medicine. Once a formidable institution for the mentally ill, its once proud architecture had crumbled into ruin, its long-forgotten corridors now ruled by whispers and shadows. Locals spoke of tormented souls roaming its abandoned halls, of lost patients whose sanity had been devoured by the facility's dark past. Yet, it was precisely this grisly reputation that had drawn Dr. Malcolm Pierce back to the place where he had once worked, a man whose own mind had been shattered by secrets buried in Westwood's silent depths. Malcolm returned to the asylum under a half-shredded raincoat and a head heavy with regret. Years earlier, he had been one of Westwood's few voices of reason, trying desperately to temper the inhumanity that permeated every corner of the institution. It was during those bleak years that he first saw things no sane man should witness: the anguished eyes of patients left to languish, the twisted experiments carried out in the name of treatment, and the nightmares that haunted even his waking moments. Now, decades later, Malcolm had come back not just to confront the ghosts of his past, but to seek an answer, a final absolution for the atrocities committed within these walls. The asylum's external facade, with its ivy-choked walls and crooked broken windows, immediately set Malcolm's heart pounding with trepidation. The great iron gates creaked open as if reluctantly granting him access to a realm where time and mercy had long since abandoned their posts. Stepping into the courtyard, every footfall disturbed years of decayed leaves, each rustle echoing like a forgotten lament. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit by a grim, filtered light that struggled to penetrate the dusty gloom. Faded murals of long-dead saints and cryptic symbols adorned the walls, a remnant of misguided attempts to sanctify the profane. Malcolm's footsteps on the cracked tiles were unnervingly loud in the oppressive silence, a reminder that even in this forsaken place, the living could disturb the dead. He made his way to what had once been the central ward, a vast chamber where rows of broken beds and rusted restraints told silent stories of cruelty. The voices, barely discernible over the pounding of his own heart, began their haunting refrain, a mournful chorus that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Help us. Help. They were not the incoherent mutterings of the damaged, but distinct, pleading words that carried the weight of desperate souls. Who's there? Malcolm's voice echoed off the tiled surfaces, uncertain yet compelled by a fragile hope. For a moment, the air stilled, and then, as if in response to his call, a figure emerged. A pale woman, her hair unkempt and her eyes filled with desperate sorrow, drifted towards him. Her voice trembled like the final notes of a requiem. We cannot leave. With each syllable, a palpable chill seeped into Malcolm's bones, the presence of unutterable grief almost too powerful to bear. Malcolm had long since learned that Westwood was no ordinary building haunted by the echoes of its troubled history. His own guilt and memories mingled with the apparitions, blurring the line between past and present. "I'm sorry," he said, voice faltering as much as his resolve. I can't undo what's been done, but maybe I can help." His words, sincere yet desperate, were met with an unsettling silence, as if the shadows deliberated on his worthiness. The woman's figure wavered like smoke in a draught, then slowly receded into the darkness of a narrow passageway. Driven by equal parts terror and an almost compulsive need for redemption, Malcolm followed her, each step taking him deeper into the heart of the asylum. He wound through a labyrinth of corridors, past locked rooms whose doors bore scars of attempted escapes and broken promises. In a secluded corner, he discovered an old office. Its heavy oaken desk was cluttered with yellowing case files, a brittle calendar still marking dates from a century past, and a wall adorned with faded photographs of smiling patients, faces now contorted in sorrow by the cruel passage of time. A particular file caught his attention. Inside was the story of Evelyn Archer, a nurse who had once cared for the patients. Her notes were cryptic yet disturbing, entries that described strange apparitions, voices in the silence, and an oppressive energy that seemed to be growing stronger. One entry ended with a chilling promise: when the darkest hour descends, she will rise to claim the souls of the damned. Malcolm's pulse quickened as he read these words, each one a portent of looming horror that gripped both his heart and mind. The sound of footsteps behind him startled Malcolm, and he spun around to see a gaunt man in a threadbare suit standing in the doorway. The man's eyes, clouded with a sorrowful madness, fixed on Malcolm as though he had been expecting him all along. "Dr. Pierce," the man rasped, voice brittle as dry leaves. "It's time you face what you've done." "Who are you?" Malcolm demanded, stepping back, his hand instinctively reaching for the old revolver he kept for protection, an irony not lost on him, for he had not once imagined having to defend himself from ghosts. The gaunt figure smiled, a thin, painful smile. "I am Thomas Westwood," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of a legacy long entwined with the asylum. "I was once the director of this place. I tried so hard to save these souls, but in the end, we were all lost to the darkness." The spectral recollection of Thomas Westwood exuded a palpable bitterness, a testament to dreams turned to dust. "I did what I thought was right," Malcolm replied, a tremor in his voice betraying years of guilt and regret. "I believed I could mend what was broken here." Thomas's gaze hardened, his eyes dark pits of sorrow and anger. "There are things you cannot mend, Doctor. Souls cannot be restored through denial. They must be confronted, even if it shatters you further." Before Malcolm could retort, a sudden cacophony of anguish erupted from the depths of the ward. The building shuddered as though the very ground beneath it was in mourning, and the disembodied voices transformed into an overwhelming wail that penetrated every fiber of his being. "Remember, remember," they chorused in an unending loop, a relentless reminder of horrors too ghastly to name. It was then that Malcolm's eyes were drawn to a narrow set of stairs leading downward into what appeared to be a subterranean bunker. The air around the staircase was thick, imbued with a palpable despair, as if centuries of sorrow and agony had converged into a single silent warning. Thomas Westwood's form dimmed into the gloom as he gestured with a withered hand. "This way, to the heart of our torment. Only by confronting the source can we hope to break the cycle." Without waiting for further explanation, Malcolm descended the stairs. Each step echoed ominously, the sound mingling with the disembodied cries of the Forsaken. The passageway wound downward into a cavern-like space where flickering candlelight revealed a series of cells, small, cramped compartments that had once housed the asylum's most troubled inmates. The walls of these cells were inscribed with desperate scrawls, words of anguish, prayers for salvation, and symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. At the far end of the hall, Malcolm noticed a sturdy iron door, its surface battered and stained with what he could only assume were remnants of forgotten rituals. The door creaked as he pushed it open, unveiling a chamber that was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. Here lay the dreaded Sanctum of Echoes, a place whispered about in hushed tones by those few who remembered the asylum's grim legacy. In the center of the room stood a colossal stone monument, draped in vines and inscribed with names that spanned generations. Around it, the temperature plummeted and the air was thick with a malevolent energy. In the glare of his flickering flashlight, Malcolm saw what appeared to be a circle of spectral figures, each lost in their own lament. Their faces, twisted in anguish and rage, turned towards him with an intensity that was both accusatory and pleading. Among them, the ghostly visage of a woman, her eyes haunted by decades of untold suffering, stepped forward and addressed him in a voice that was barely more than a whisper. "Your sins brought us here. Your silence allowed us to suffer." Her tone was mournful yet laced with a cold fury. "You left us to be forgotten." Malcolm's mind reeled with the realization that every moment of indecision, every failure to speak out against the horrors of Westwood, had contributed to an enduring legacy of torment. "I never meant for this to happen," he pleaded, his voice shaking with guilt and despair. "I tried to save lives, to offer a measure of dignity." But before he could finish, the stone monument trembled violently, as if awakening from a long slumber. The spectral assembly howled in unison, cacophony of grief and wrath that threatened to drown out reason. In that moment of utter chaos, Malcolm understood that no confession or apology could undo the damage. The asylum itself seemed to demand a reckoning, a final act of penance that would either restore balance or doom him to the very fate he sought to escape. A sudden, overwhelming presence washed over him, a divine, unyielding force that resonated with the sorrow of countless lost souls. The ground beneath his feet cracked open, and a stream of icy wind surged through the chamber, carrying with it echoes of promises made long ago. A voice, neither male nor female, but resonant with the combined timbre of many, spoke from the chasm. "Redemption comes at a cost, Doctor. Only when you lay bare your soul can the dead be reconciled." Malcolm's eyes filled with tears as he stared into the fissure, a darkness that beckoned him to confront the buried nightmares of his own past. Memories assaulted him in rapid succession, the faces of patients he could not save, the desperate pleas that went unanswered, and the quiet horrors of neglect that had plagued every day of his tenure at Westwood. Gritting his teeth against the weight of his regret, Malcolm stepped closer to the chasm and, with trembling resolve, began to recount every hidden truth of his time at the asylum. His voice, faltering at first, grew steadier as he confessed the darkest secrets of a system designed to break the human spirit. "I ignored their cries," he murmured, voice thick with remorse. "I watched in silence while their lives were stolen by arrogance, cruelty, and indifference. I failed them." With each word, the oppressive energy in the room ebbed and flowed as if gauging the purity of his confession. The spectral voices paused in their mournful chorus, listening as one, as the old sins of the past found their mirror in his shattered soul. Time seemed suspended in that cavern of anguish. The air shivered as the unseen forces stirred, the ancient monument responding to the truth spilled forth by a once staunch man. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tortured visages around him began to soften. The relentless wails of the past transformed into murmurs of understanding, each ghostly face registering a glimmer of hope where there had once been only despair. As Malcolm's confession reached its painful crescendo, the chasm's dark void was pierced by a single radiant beam of light. The spectral figures, each once bound by hatred and sorrow, stepped forward as if drawn to the promise of absolution. The enormous stone monument split open along a jagged line, revealing within it a relic, a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inscribed on its surface were words in an archaic script promising, "Here lies the redemption of broken souls." The voices swelled in a final, harmonious chant. Malcolm, overcome by a mixture of relief and sorrow, reached out a shaking hand and retrieved the box. As his fingers closed over it, the oppressive chill dissipated, replaced by a warming glow that spread through the chamber and up his spine. The spectral figures, now more ethereal than corporeal, began to dissolve into soft motes of light that drifted upward like the last embers of a dying fire. In that profound moment of reckoning, the legacy of Westwood Asylum and the innumerable lives marred by silence were given a measure of peace. Malcolm realized that his confession was only the beginning, a necessary step in a long journey toward healing. He cradled the relic close to his chest as he ascended the winding stairs back into the decaying corridors above. The oppressive darkness of the lower levels was gradually replaced by an almost sacred silence, punctuated only by the distant, fading echoes of relief. Outside, the first pale fingers of dawn crept over the horizon, casting long, forgiving shadows over the ruined estate. Malcolm emerged from Westwood Asylum not as a man unburdened, but as a soul forever changed. Haunted by the memories of the past, yet determined to honor them by speaking out and mending the wounds of history. In the days that followed, he meticulously documented every detail of his harrowing experience, his words a plea for remembrance and a vow never to allow the silence that once reigned here to be repeated. In a quiet lecture hall at a small university, Malcolm recounted his encounter with the tortured souls of Westwood. "I stand before you as a testament to the power of truth," he said, his voice resonating with both sorrow and hope. "We must acknowledge our darkest moments if we are ever to find the light. The ghosts of Westwood are not here to haunt us. They are here to remind us that healing begins with honesty. We are responsible, not just for our actions, but for our silence in the face of injustice." Listeners sat in silent, rapt attention, the weight of his confession etching itself into the hearts of those present. In that small act of public remembrance, Malcolm sought to reclaim what had been lost, the dignity and memory of lives swallowed by apathy and fear. For many, his testimony served as a catalyst, a call to action against the systemic cruelty that continues to plague society, echoing far beyond the decrepit corridors of an abandoned asylum. And though Westwood Asylum now stood as little more than crumbling stone and fading memories, its legacy endured in the whispered thanks of liberated souls, and in the quiet determination of a man who had dared to face the darkest parts of himself. On nights when the wind howled through the broken windows and the silence of forgotten corridors pressed in around him, Malcolm could still hear the chorus of voices, now gentle, now forgiving, reminding him that even in the deepest darkness, there is always a path toward redemption.
Story number 5.
The sea was an endless abyss of turmoil and secrets, a living entity that murmured forgotten names under the relentless crash of the tide. Along the craggy coastline of a remote fishing village, where the salt air bit into exposed skin and ancient legends clung like barnacles to every rock, a dilapidated wharf held witness to decades of inexplicable events. In that forsaken corner of the world, reality and nightmare intertwined in a tapestry of grief, guilt, and inexplicable terror. Elias Marlowe, a weathered maritime historian with deep-set eyes and a haunted past, had come to this isolated village in search of the truth behind the inexplicable vanishings of several local fishermen. The villagers, stooped by years of hardship and loss, whispered repeatedly of the curse of the drowned, a malevolent presence said to rise from the depths of a shipwreck, resting on a hidden reef, far from prying eyes. Elias, whose curiosity was as boundless as the ocean itself, had always been drawn to stories of the deep and the mysteries that lurked beneath its surface. He arrived one overcast afternoon when the wind carried a sharp tang of salt and decay. The village, with its weather-beaten cottages and empty docks, was shrouded in an eerie silence. Even the gulls seemed to avoid the area, their usual cries dampened by a pervasive dread. Elias's footsteps echoed on the worn wooden planks of the wharf as he carried an old leather satchel filled with tattered maps, nautical charts, and a battered journal that had once belonged to his late mentor. This journal had hinted at the existence of the ghostly vessel, a ship rumored to be doomed by treachery and bound to the watery grave by its captain's unyielding desire for revenge. After a brief, hushed conversation with old Ben, the last living villager who remembered the days before the curse had descended, Elias was pointed toward an isolated inlet. Ben's voice was a cracked whisper, heavy with grief. "They say the ship's name was the Valerian Queen," he murmured, "a vessel that vanished one stormy night, leaving nothing but sorrow in its wake. It isn't just a wreck out there. It's a prison where souls of the betrayed dwell in anguish. Do not go searching if you value your life." Elias's skepticism warred with his desire to uncover the truth. That night, as the wind howled like a chorus of lost souls and dark clouds blotted out the moon, he prepared his small boat for departure. The sea was a mirror of his inner turmoil, turbulent and unyielding. With only the compass of his mentor's journal and his own relentless resolve for company, he pushed off from the shore and sailed into the maw of the night. Hours later, when the boat drifted into a patch of calm amidst the swirling chaos, Elias noticed an unnatural hush over the water. The sea, which minutes ago had been awash with the sound of crashing waves, now whispered in eerie silence. Ahead, illuminated by faint moonlight that peeked from behind the clouds, lay the submerged silhouette of what once had been a grand vessel, the Valerian Queen. Her masts were skeletal relics jutting from the ocean like the fingers of a long-dead giant, and her hull, blackened by centuries of salt and time, exuded an aura of despair. Elias anchored his boat at the edge of a jagged reef and donned his diving gear. His heart pounded in his chest as he prepared to plunge into the depths. The surface light was swallowed quickly. leaving him in an inky realm where bioluminescent creatures darted like phantoms. As he descended, his eyes struggled to adjust, and the chill of the water sank deep into his bones. The wreck of the Valerian Queen revealed itself slowly, a hulking mass of rotted wood, tangled rigging, and haunting silhouettes of ghostly figures, barely perceptible against the murky background. In the dim glow of his torch, Elias could make out carvings on the decaying hull, scrawled names, desperate messages, and symbols that spoke of curses and vengeance. It was here that he first sensed a presence, a watchful, sorrowful gaze that seemed to follow him through the watery labyrinth. His scientific mind urged him to rationalize the fear, to attribute it to the isolation and the play of light on wreckage, yet deep down he felt that something more sinister was at work. Suddenly, as he navigated through a narrow corridor within the ship, his light caught movement, a hand, impossibly pale and translucent, reaching out from a fractured bulkhead. Elias froze, his lungs burning in the cold water. The hand lingered for a moment before vanishing into the darkness, as if it had never been there at all. The overwhelming dread was punctuated by a disembodied voice echoing faintly through the water. "Do you seek to remember our pain?" Elias's pulse raced as he pressed on, the words resonating with the anguish of centuries. Reaching what appeared to have once been the captain's quarters, he found a chamber frozen in time. An old, ornate desk sat half-buried in silt, its surface cluttered with rusted keys and faded letters written in trembling hand. Amid the decay, a large, ornate mirror stood against the far wall. Its surface was murky, yet it reflected not only his silhouette but also another. A gaunt, spectral figure draped in a captain's coat, his eyes sorrowful and hollow. "Who are you?" Elias whispered, voice raw with shock and wonder. The spectral captain regarded him silently for an agonizing moment before his figure wavered, as if caught between realms. In a voice that seemed to be carried on the water's current, he replied, "I am Captain Alistair Crow. Betrayed by those I trusted, I was left to drown in my own hubris and malice. Our souls are tethered here in eternal torment until our stories are told and our vengeance is laid to rest." The captain's words hung heavy in the water, and the temperature dropped abruptly, mingling with Elias's rising terror. The walls of the chamber seemed to pulse with the energy of 1,000 unspeakable memories. Elias's thoughts flashed to the journal in his possession, to the cryptic entries that hinted at treachery and a curse unleashed by greed and betrayal. He felt an inexplicable pull to free the anguished souls from their prison, to give voice to the forgotten tales of despair. But doing so, he knew, might come at a tremendous personal cost. Determined to document every detail, Elias activated his underwater recorder, a contraption salvaged from modern technology and old-fashioned craftsmanship, and began to speak softly, his voice a steady murmur in the spectral gloom. "Captain Crow, I am Elias Marlowe, a seeker of truth. I have come to witness the relics of your fate and to offer what little comfort I might." A chilling silence followed his proclamation, as the spectral figure inclined his head as if in reluctant acknowledgement. Then, the captain's voice returned, now laden with regret and an unyielding yearning for redemption. "There is one relic that binds us to this abyss, a locket of silver, etched with the names of those we lost. It was stolen from us in our final hour, a token of betrayal by one of our own. It must be returned to the altar hidden deep within this very wreck, or forever we shall be doomed to wander these watery depths." Elias, though trembling, understood that this was his fated task, a final expedition into the heart of darkness. With the spectral captain's directions echoing in his mind, he swam deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the ship. The passageways narrowed, forcing him to crawl through claustrophobic spaces where the pressure of the water seemed to constrict his very soul. His light revealed grotesque murals painted by the dead, a macabre gallery of suffering where faces contorted in eternal agony stared back at him from the walls. Along the way, Elias encountered fleeting glimpses of the doomed crew. Transparent figures drifted through the water like fragments of a shattered memory, men and women, their eyes vacant, their gestures eerily synchronized as they reenacted moments of their final, harrowing hours. One figure reached out to him with a look of pained longing, her spectral fingers quivering as if she wished to beg forgiveness. Yet as soon as he drew near, she dissipated into a swirl of silt and sorrow. Each encounter further blurred the line between his scientific quest and a descent into the realm of nightmares. After what felt like an eternity, Elias arrived at a hidden chamber beneath the wreck, the so-called Altar of Regrets. In the center of the chamber, enshrouded in a halo of bioluminescent algae, stood an intricately carved stone pedestal. Ancient symbols, weathered yet potent, were etched onto its surface, and upon it lay a delicate silver locket. Its surface was embossed with intertwined filigree and the faint traces of a name, Marianne. A cold shudder ran down Elias's spine as the realization dawned upon him that this token was the key to releasing the anguish of not just one, but many tormented souls. Before he could reach for it, a deep, mournful wail rose over the chamber, a lament of betrayal and unending grief that made the very water tremble. The wail was joined by a chorus of spectral voices, each one weaving a sorrowful tale of loss and despair. In that oppressive moment, the ghostly form of Marianne appeared before him, her eyes brimming with tears that glowed like liquid moonlight. Her voice was fragile, yet it carried a weight of command. Return what is ours, and let the memories find peace. Who are you? Elias managed, his voice quavering in the dim light. I am Marianne, she replied, the single syllable heavy with regret. I was the heart of this crew, a beacon of hope amid betrayal. They took the locket and our honor, condemning us to an endless purgatory in these cursed depths. Her gaze swept over the relic on the pedestal. It must be restored to the altar beyond, where the voices of the drowned may finally sing in chorus with the living, and where our sins will be washed away by the tide of forgiveness. The spectral figures gathered, their ethereal forms circling the chamber in silent supplication. Even as the voices continued their sorrowful hymn, Elias steeled himself to complete the task before him. With hands shaking from both the chill of the water and the weight of his responsibility, he clutched the locket. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, the chamber fell deathly silent, as if the entire world were holding its breath. Elias swam toward a narrow passage lined with remnants of ancient stone stairs, leading to an even lower cavern. The passage was illuminated by a strange, otherworldly glow, a light that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the abyss, painting them in hues of spectral blue and silver. Each step was a struggle against the crushing pressure of water and fate, and every stroke of his arms reminded him that he was crossing a threshold from which there might be no return. At the end of the passage, he reached a vast underwater grotto. In the center of the grotto sat an ancient stone structure, an altar carved from a single block of granite. The altar was covered with marine growth and encrusted with the detritus of centuries, yet it radiated a solemn majesty, as if it had long awaited this moment. Elias's heart pounded in his ears as he approached, aware that the success of this act might be the only chance to break the cycle of despair that had haunted the souls within the Valerian Queen. With the spectral chorus echoing in his memory, he carefully placed the silver locket upon a carved indentation in the altar's surface. As soon as the locket made contact, a profound stillness settled over the grotto. The water shimmered, and the faint glow around the altar intensified until it banished the pervasive darkness. A surge of energy, both terrible and redemptive, radiated outward, washing over Elias and the spectral presences that gathered like whispers in the tide. Slowly, the anguished faces of the drowned began to soften, their spectral forms dissolving into a brilliant cascade of light. The voices melded into a single, harmonious note, a sound that was both a farewell and a benediction. Marianne's form approached Elias, her eyes now filled with the gentle luminescence of hope. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice blending with the soft susurration of the sea. "Our pain is acknowledged, our memories restored." The ancient altar pulsed with life for a few moments longer before its radiance receded into a quiet, compassionate glow. Elias floated there, adrift in the vast ocean of regret and redemption, the weight of his mission lifting as the souls of the drowned found solace at last. He understood with a clarity that pierced the depths of his own sorrow that even the darkest tragedies could be transformed through the act of remembrance and a willingness to confront the ghosts of one's past. In the days that followed, as he made his way back to the surface and then to the lonely shore, Elias recorded every detail of his surreal encounter. His journal, once filled with questions and doubts, now contained an undeniable chronicle of hope emerging from horror. The villagers later spoke in hushed, reverent tones of the stranger who had journeyed into the cursed depths and emerged forever changed. A man who had carried the voices of the forgotten and helped them find eternal peace. Even now, on stormy nights when the wind howls like the crying of old souls along the rocky coast, those who wander the shore might catch a glimpse of a lone figure standing at the edge of the water. Some say it is Elias, still bound to the legends of that cursed sea, while others believe it to be one of the freed spirits, watching over the fragile boundary between memory and oblivion. And as the waves retreat from the shore, there lingers the promise of redemption, a haunting reminder that, even in the midst of relentless terror, the human spirit and the lost souls of the deep can find solace in the light of truth.
Story number 6.
Under a bruised twilight sky, the old carnival loomed like a rusted relic of nightmares, its faded banners flapping listlessly in a cold wind, and its silent midway strewn with the detritus of shattered memories. For decades, locals had whispered of the carnival that arrived unexpectedly one summer night, only to vanish as abruptly as it had appeared. Yet behind its dazzling lights and joyful music lay a cruel secret, one that had long since devoured the souls of its performers and patrons alike. Tonight, that secret would claw its way back into the realm of the living. Mara Ellington was never one to succumb to superstition, but the pull of a mystery too monstrous to ignore had drawn her to the entrance of this dilapidated wonderland. A freelance journalist known for her dark investigations and unswerving determination, she had heard the stories, the inexplicable screams echoing in the fog, and the sensation of being watched by eyes that should not exist. Clutched in her hand was a small, leather-bound notebook, its margins filled with scribbled hints of tragedy and terror. Beside her, her longtime friend and photographer, Ryan Miles, adjusted the settings on his vintage camera, his eyes scanning the gloom for any flicker of movement that might betray the carnival's hidden life. "Are you sure about this?" Ryan's voice trembled slightly as he looked at the towering, crooked entrance gate, its ironwork twisted into ominous shapes that recalled contorted faces. "I don't like it here. It's too quiet." Mara offered a half smile, though her own pulse throbbed with apprehension. "Quiet can be a lie, Ryan. Sometimes the scariest secrets hide behind silence." With that, she stepped forward and pushed open the creaking gate, its rusty hinges groaning as if in agony. The fairground stretched before them in half light, a ghostly tableau of overgrown rides, crumbling concession stands, and a colossal big top that sagged under the weight of years. An eerie mist hovered just above the ground, swirling around abandoned cotton candy machines and a carousel whose painted horses were frozen in expressions of terror rather than joy. As they ventured onto the cracked pavement, the once bright carnival lights sputtered and blinked like the last heartbeat of a dying beast, each flash illuminating snippets of grotesque shadows that danced at the edge of vision. "Listen," Mara whispered, stopping short in front of a booth decorated with peeling paint and faded carnival slogans. From deep within the silence, a soft, melodic tinkling emerged, as if from a wind-up music box. Its tune was bittersweet, filled with the remnants of a twisted past. "That sound. Do you hear it?" Ryan nodded silently, his camera lens trained on a darkened corridor that led to what once might have been a hall of mirrors. Together, they moved cautiously toward the source of the sound, their footsteps muffled by layers of dust and dead leaves. The air was heavy with the scent of old grease paint, rust, and something else, an odor that might have been sweat and sorrow. Inside the Hall of Mirrors, reflections multiplied into disturbing distortions. The beam of Ryan's flashlight bounced off shattered glass, making it seem as though ghostly figures lurked in every corner. Mara's heart pounded harder with each step, and as she noted the inscriptions scrawled on the back of a cracked mirror, names and dates intermingled with frantic sketches of faces, it became clear that she was standing amidst relics of forgotten lives. One inscription read, "For those who never left." A sudden, plaintive whisper slithered through the hall. "Help! Us!" it pleaded, reverberating off the mirrored walls in a chorus of despair. Mara's breath caught in her throat as she spun around. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a faint, bluish outline, a figure leaning against one of the mirrors, its eyes dull and mournful. But when she reached out, there was nothing there except reflected darkness. "Maybe it's just our minds playing tricks," Ryan offered, though his unease was evident in the quaver of his voice. "Places like this, they do things to you." Before Mara could reply, a loud bang echoed from deeper within the carnival, followed by a series of hurried footsteps that pounded against the wooden floorboards. The sound was erratic and frenzied, as if someone or something was running through corridors in a blind panic. The sound seemed both distant and horrifyingly close. Without speaking, the two exchanged glances and resolved to follow the noise, their pace quickening toward the source. They emerged into a narrow alley that led to the old funhouse, a warped structure with a sagging roof and windows boarded up by time. The door, scarred by graffiti and splintered wood, stood ajar. Mara hesitated, glancing at Ryan. "We go in together," she said firmly, though her voice betrayed the tremor of uncertainty. Inside, the funhouse was a labyrinth of disoriented corridors and rooms fitted with fading murals and carnival paraphernalia that had become macabre relics. In one room, they discovered a small theater space where the dusty stage was set with antique props, a rickety podium, a cracked mask of a clown with a permanent, contorted grin, and rows of broken seats covered in spider webs. A single spotlight, its bulb long extinguished, cast a feeble glow on a message scrawled on the wall in red: "The show never ends." As Mara's eyes adjusted to the gloom, a door creaked behind her. Spinning around, she found herself face to face with a gaunt man in a threadbare suit, his face half obscured by the brim of a worn hat. His eyes, sunken and haunted, held an intensity that made her skin crawl. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a rasping tone that echoed with despair. "This is a place of unending sorrow." Ryan instinctively stepped between Mara and the stranger. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the palpable tension. The man tilted his head, a pained expression flickering over his features. "They called me Gideon," he murmured. "I once was the master of ceremonies here. I arranged the spectacles, orchestrated the laughter, but the laughter died the moment the shadows took hold. I tried to remind them of their dreams, but in return, they became the nightmares. I lost everyone to the darkness." His voice cracked as he continued. "And now I remain, a relic, doomed to witness what you too might become." Mara's journalistic instinct flared. "What happened here, Gideon? What cursed this carnival?" she pressed, edging closer despite the sudden chill that seemed to emanate from him. Gideon's eyes darted around the room as if searching for unseen terrors. "It began with a performance, a grand finale that was meant to be the pinnacle of the carnival's glory," he whispered, almost too softly for the oppressive walls to carry his words. But something went wrong. The audience did not applaud, they screamed. I saw faces twisted in agony, and in that moment, the stage turned against us all. They say the carnival was built on stolen souls, and that night, it claimed its due. The performers, the visitors, everyone. He paused, his gaunt fingers trembling as he pointed toward a narrow staircase that descended further into the building. "If you seek the truth, you must go down there, to the heart of the nightmare." Though dread pooled in her stomach, Mara steeled herself. "We have to know what happened," she said, her voice a mix of determination and fear. Ryan hesitated, glancing at the gaping staircase, its steps carved into darkness. I'm not so sure we should, Mara," he admitted. "Some secrets are meant to be buried." But once the seed of morbid curiosity had taken root, Mara could not turn back. "We owe it to those who suffered here," she replied, her tone resolute. "The dead deserve their voices, and the living deserve to know." Ryan's gaze fell, torn between caution and the desire to help her uncover the truth. With a heavy sigh, he nodded, and the two followed Gideon down the narrow, winding stairs that led beneath the funhouse. In the subterranean depths, the air was stale and reeked of decay and old blood. The faint flicker of emergency lights along the narrow corridor cast elongated, dancing shadows that seemed to have lives of their own. As they walked, the sound of distant carnival music, now warped and ghostly, echoed around them, a grim reminder of happier times turned macabre. They soon arrived at a cavernous chamber, lined with rusted iron fixtures and dark stains that looked eerily like dried tears. In the center of the room lay what appeared to be an ornate, abandoned stage, now overtaken by grotesque sculptures of contorted figures. Each statue was frozen in an expression of agony, as if forever trapped in a moment of horror. Gideon stopped at the edge of the stage and turned to Mara. "This was once the marquee of our finale. Tonight, the tragic performance continues every hour, every day. The souls of that fateful night are bound here by an ancient curse, a contract written in blood and sealed with our laughter. and each visitor, each fleeting moment of fear fuels its power. A cold dread threaded through Mara's veins as she surveyed the chamber. Flickering shadows revealed fleeting images in the gloom. Apparitions of jubilant performers whose twisted smiles contorted into grimaces of pain, ghostly figures of carnival-goers caught mid-scream. It was as if time had splintered into 1,000 agonizing moments, each one replaying the final hours of that ill-fated performance. In the midst of the oppressive silence, a guttural cry reverberated through the chamber, a sound so primal and filled with sorrow that it made Mara's ears ring. "Play the show," came a disembodied command, layered over the sobs and wails of unseen entities. Ryan's hand tightened around his camera as he instinctively began snapping photographs, each flash illuminating more of the nightmarish tableau. Mara's eyes fell on an elaborate, dust-covered piano set against a wall. Its ivory keys were chipped and yellowed, but when she pressed one, it resonated with a melancholic note that seemed to carry memories of a long-lost aria. Compelled by an inexplicable force, she lifted the piano's heavy, tarnished lid. Inside, beneath a veil of cobwebs, lay a tattered, leather-bound ledger. Its pages were filled with frantic scrawlings, names, dates, and incantations, detailing an unholy pact made to guarantee the carnival's eternal allure. Each name, it appeared, belonged to a soul that had performed that final act or been victim to its consequences. The ledger, it's a record of our curse, Mara whispered in awe and horror. Every life taken that night, every moment of terror is bound here. If we can break this contract, if we can find a way to honor these lost souls, perhaps we can end the cycle. Gideon's spectral face contorted in a mixture of hope and sorrow. There is one last act, he intoned. A final performance awaits us. Only by reenacting the truth of that doomed night, acknowledging both the beauty and the horror of what occurred, can we lift the curse. But be warned, the performance demands a sacrifice. His voice wavered as if each word carried an unbearable weight of regret. One of you must step onto that stage and relive every painful moment, embracing the agony of our fate so that the curse may be broken. The chamber fell into a dreadful silence. Ryan's eyes darted between Mara and Gideon, uncertainty etched upon his features. "Are you saying one of us must die?" he asked, voice barely a whisper, but Mara's determined gaze held his attention. "No," she said, though her voice was tinged with a mournful resolve. "Not in the literal sense. I think it means one of us has to willingly carry the burden of that night, take on the sorrow, the guilt, the horror, so that the dead can finally rest in peace." A chill spread through Ryan as he realized the gravity of her words. His hand shook when he set his camera aside. "Mara, I can't let you do this alone," he pleaded. "There has to be another way. We're not meant to be martyrs for a curse." Mara stepped toward the altar-like stage, eyes fixed on the ledger in her hand. "Sometimes the truth demands more than we're willing to give," she replied softly. "I have to set things right, for them and for all of us who have suffered in silence." Her voice, though trembling, held an air of defiant acceptance. "I'll be the one to play the final act." Gideon's hollow eyes glistened with bittersweet relief as he murmured, "Then step forward, Mara, and let the performance begin." With that, he faded slowly into the darkness, leaving Mara and Ryan alone before the ancient stage that had seen countless tragedies. As Mara took her first trembling steps onto the worn boards of the stage, the cavernous room seemed to pulse with anticipation. The ghostly crowd of lost souls gathered, their spectral faces turned toward her with expressions of yearning and melancholy. The distant strains of music swelled, and the ledger's words glowed faintly on the stage floor, an eerie script that beckoned her to recite the final incantation. Gathering her courage, Mara began to speak, her voice quavering at first but growing steadier with every word. She recited the litany of names and dates, each syllable unlocking memories of lives stolen in the heat of betrayal and the ecstasy of a blood-soaked finale. With each word, the spectral apparitions stirred. The stage trembled. The sound of clapping, sorrowful hands echoed through the darkness, mingling with the soft, mournful tune of the phantom piano. Time, it seemed, stretched and contracted until the boundaries between past and present blurred. Mara's recitations fused with the ambient melancholy of the chamber, and a shockwave of raw emotion pulsed outward, shaking the very foundations of the cursed carnival. She could feel the pain of every lost soul, as with the weight of their unfulfilled dreams pressing on her heart, and amid the catharsis, she sensed the curse begin to fracture. The ethereal audience wailed as their tormented energies swirled in a crescendo of longing and regret. The ledger's pages fluttered, as though stirred by an otherworldly wind, and the room filled with a ghostly light that slowly overpowered the deep shadows. In that incandescent moment, Mara reached the final lines of the incantation, her voice echoing with both sorrow and hope. A profound silence fell. The spectral figures paused, their eyes brimming with both release and despair. Then, as if the very air exhaled a sigh of relief, the curse that had held the carnival captive for decades began to unravel. One by one, the apparitions flickered and dissolved into gentle motes of light that drifted upward like the whispered farewells of the departed. The oppressive weight that had gripped the chamber lifted, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. Ryan, standing at the edge of the stage, could hardly believe what he witnessed. Tears glimmered in his eyes as he realized the cost of the final performance, a sacrifice not of life, but of the lingering, unspoken anguish that had shackled these lost souls. Mara's voice, now soft and resolute, was the final note in a requiem for all who had suffered here. When the chamber grew silent once more, the ledger lay still upon the stage, its cursed script faded as if washed away by a tide of redemption. The ghostly carnival vanished into the recesses of memory, leaving behind only the remnants of a long-forgotten nightmare, a haunting legacy that no longer demanded the price of endless sorrow. Outside the carnival's crumbling facade, the first hints of dawn began to break. Mara stepped out into the cool morning air, each step lightened by the knowledge that she had honored the dead and given them the release they so desperately deserved. Ryan followed, his camera now filled with images that transcended the boundary between terror and transcendent beauty, a record of a night when the darkness was challenged by the light of truth. As the old carnival slowly faded into the mist of the early day, but its secrets now freed from the chains of a cursed past, Mara knew that the story of that final performance would live on. In her journal, she documented every heart-stopping moment, every whispered confession from the phantoms of the funhouse, so that the tale of the damned might never be forgotten again. In the years that followed, whispers of the carnival's final night emerged in quiet conversation, a legend not of unending terror, but of redemption attained through the courage to confront one's darkest memories. And on stormy evenings, when the wind howled over barren fields and the night fell heavy with unshed sorrow, a lone figure sometimes appeared at the old gate, staring longingly into the distance as if listening for the echoes of a final, haunting refrain. For Mara, that night changed everything. It taught her that some curses were not meant to be feared for their power to destroy, but rather revered for the truth they force us to confront. A truth that could be as liberating as it was horrifying. And though the carnival was long gone, its memory remained, a spectral testament to the enduring resilience of the human spirit in the face of relentless horror.
Story number 7.
Under a suffocating canopy of black clouds and bitter winter winds, a lone sedan crept up the winding, deserted road that led to Blackwood Manor, a sprawling relic of a bygone era hemmed in by ancient, barren trees whose gnarled branches clawed at the night sky. The manor had long been the subject of hushed rumors in nearby towns, a place where sorrow and evil intertwined, where time itself seemed to wither beneath the weight of unseen horrors. Tonight, its dark silhouette beckoned 3 travelers whose fates were inextricably linked to its tragic legacy. Mark Aldridge, a pragmatic historian with a yearning for truth, had spent years poring over faded documents and whispered confessions about Blackwood Manor. His younger sister Diana, whose empathetic eyes belied a turbulent past, clutched his hand as they stepped from the car, her breath emerging in visible puffs despite the stagnant chill. With them was Elliot Monroe, a skeptical yet passionate investigator whose camera and recorder hung at his side. They had come together for a single purpose, to uncover the true story behind the manor's reputation and to confront the lingering menace that the locals swore was responsible for centuries of misfortune. The heavy oak door of the manor stood ajar, as if inviting the trio into its abyss. With cautious steps, they crossed the threshold into a foyer cloaked in perpetual gloom. Broken shards of stained glass littered the floor, casting fractured patterns of bloody light across walls adorned with faded portraits of grim-faced ancestors, whose eyes seemed to follow their every move. an overwhelming, stale odor of decay and mildew mixed with the faint aroma of long-extinguished candles. "Do you feel that?" Diana whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of their measured footsteps. Her eyes darted to the shadowed corners, where the interplay of light and darkness suggested movements that defied logic. Mark paused, squinting into the darkness. "It's as if the manor itself is watching us," he murmured. "We're not alone here." Elliot checked his recorder, its red light blinking insistently, and replied, "Whether it's our imagination or something more, we need evidence. Let's keep moving." They advanced into the heart of the manor, following a long, narrow corridor lined with heavy, peeling wallpaper and punctuated by the solemn tick of a distant grandfather clock. Every step echoed in the silence until they reached a parlor, a great room that once had been the center of lavish gatherings. Now, decayed furniture lay strewn about as if discarded in a fit of madness, and a grand piano sat in the corner, its keys yellowed and chipped. Against one wall, a large mirror, its surface marred by cracks, reflected their tense silhouettes in something else, a fleeting movement that vanished the moment they turned to look. A chill slithered down Diana's spine as she moved closer to inspect the mirror. Did you see that?" she asked breathlessly. Mark shook his head slowly. "I saw nothing. It's just a trick of the light." Yet even his voice wavered with uncertainty. Elliot, ever the rationalist, took a few careful photos. "Maybe the mirror trapped an echo of the past," he suggested, half joking. His tone fell flat in the oppressive silence. Their investigation soon led them to a narrow, spiral staircase that plunged into the depths of the manor. A damp, musty air greeted them as they descended, and the steady clack of their footsteps on creaking steps seemed to awaken long-slumbering memories. The staircase opened into a vast cellar filled with relics of a forgotten life. Rusted tools, broken furniture, and stacks of yellowed letters and diaries. One diary, its leather cover cracked and soft with age, lay atop a wooden crate. Mark, drawn by both professional curiosity and a gnawing sense of foreboding, gingerly pried it open. Inside, the pages chronicled the life of Evelyn Blackwood, the last mistress of the manor. Her words, scrawled in hurried, tremulous handwriting, told of love, betrayal, and unspeakable acts committed in the dead of night. "I was deceived by the man I loved," one passage read, "and cursed by the very air I breathed within these walls. Our sins feed the darkness, and I am its eternal prisoner." The diary ended abruptly, as if Evelyn had been forced to tear out the remainder of her life from the page. A deep sense of dread settled over the group as Mark read aloud, his voice trembling slightly with each word. "She speaks of a curse, a pact made in anger and despair. Perhaps the manor is not merely haunted by restless souls, but by an ancient malevolence that feasts on their anguish." Diana's eyes shone with unshed tears as she whispered, "I feel her sorrow, as if it were my own." Before they could ponder further, a sudden, almost imperceptible sound, a soft, mournful hum, drifted through the air. It was accompanied by a subtle vibration that made the very walls seem to shudder. Elliot's camera captured blurred images of spectral figures that flitted in and out of view, their forms indistinct and horrifyingly translucent. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice edged with disbelief. "It sounded like singing." "It's coming from the dining hall," Mark said, his tone tight as they headed in that direction. The door to the dining hall, heavy and ornate, creaked open with a groan that reverberated through the manor's empty halls. Inside, a long table dominated the room, still set for a meal that had been abandoned decades ago. Silverware lay tarnished, and a once grand chandelier hung precariously overhead, its crystals scattered like broken dreams. In the center of the table, upon a white lace cloth that had yellowed with time, rested an antique music box. Its delicate figurine, a dancer in a tattered gown, seemed to almost sway as the mechanism inside turned with an unseen hand. Mark approached it, his pulse quickening, and carefully lifted the lid. A haunting melody filled the air, a lullaby of regret and longing that resonated deep within their souls. At the very instant the music began, the candle flames on the wall flickered wildly as if disturbed by an unseen presence. "Who are you?" Diana called out softly, almost pleadingly, her voice trembling yet imbued with a compassion that belied the terror of the moment. For a fleeting second, the air seemed to still, and then a voice answered, not from a human throat, but echoing as if from a long-buried memory. "I am Evelyn, trapped by my own sorrow." The words were layered with despair and an ancient grief that shook them to the core. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he whispered, "Evelyn Blackwood, we found your diary. Why did this happen?" The spectral figure of Evelyn appeared before them, a faint, ethereal form draped in a gown that resembled the faded elegance of a bygone era. Her eyes, sorrowful and immeasurably deep, met theirs with a mixture of pleading and resignation. Betrayal and forbidden love led me to commit an act unspeakable. I condemned my family, my soul, and all who resided in this manor to eternal suffering. The curse was not placed upon them by a malevolent external force. It was born of my own despair. Now, we are all condemned. Before they could react, the floor beneath the table shuddered and a new terror emerged. A deep, guttural rumble echoed from the depths of the manor, a sound that no mortal throat could produce. Shadows congregated along the walls, pooling into sinister shapes that seemed to writhe and twist with a malevolent life of their own. The temperature plummeted, and the sound of whispered accusations, sharp, angry, and filled with ancient malice, weaved through the oppressive darkness. "Get back!" Mark shouted, grabbing Diana's hand as the shadows slithered toward them. Elliot fumbled for his camera, desperately trying to capture these aberrations before his senses betrayed him. The music box's melody faltered and then broke into a dissonant clatter, as if the curse itself were unraveling. Evelyn raised a spectral hand, her eyes filled with a desperate urgency. "You must listen. Only by confronting the darkness within can the curse be broken. I am bound to this place by my regret, but there is a way. Deep within the manor's cellar lies an urn containing the ashes of those lost to my transgression. If you dare to set them free, perhaps the cycle of torment can end." The words sent a shiver through the trio. Mark's rational mind warred with the primal fear that clawed at his heart. "Are you saying we have to perform some ritual?" he asked, voice cracking with both hope and terror. "No ritual, only confession," Evelyn replied softly, her voice echoing like the sigh of a dying wind. "You must face what you fear. Your own guilt, your own hidden sorrows. Only then can you offer the absolution they so desperately seek." As the oppressive presence gathered strength, the room darkened further. The walls seemed to pulse with life as fragments of the past materialized. Images of a lavish ball, laughter that turned to screams, and a night when the manor's opulence was stained by blood and regret. Mark, Diana, and Elliot stood as silent witnesses to this unfolding tragedy, feeling as though they were cradling the weight of not just one lost soul, but an entire lineage of anguish. Realizing that the path to breaking the curse lay deeper into the recesses of Blackwood Manor, the trio gathered their resolve and retraced their steps down the winding staircase into the bowels of the building. The dank, narrow corridors of the lower levels were lit only by the intermittent glow of a single, sputtering lantern that Mark had found in a forgotten closet. Every step was a journey into a dimension where past and present converged, a time when pain festered in every wall and every whispered memory cried for release. In a hidden chamber behind a rusted door, they discovered the urn described by Evelyn, a somber marble vessel inscribed with indecipherable runes and etched with sorrowful names. The chamber itself was a mausoleum of regret. The floor was scattered with remnants of broken porcelain and faded photographs depicting smiling faces that had long since been swallowed by despair. The air was thick with loss, and the quiet was punctuated by the soft weeping of an unseen mourner. Diana approached the urn with trembling hands, feeling the pull of an invisible force urging her to take responsibility for the past. I don't fully understand," she stuttered, her eyes reflecting both determination and dread. "But maybe we can end this if we let go of what haunts us." Mark placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "We all have our ghosts," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Perhaps this is our chance to lay them to rest. Not just the spirits of Blackwood, but the demons we hide inside ourselves." Elliot, although visibly shaken, adjusted his camera and recorder. "Even if this is something beyond our understanding, we have to try, for the sake of those trapped here and for ourselves." With a deep, shuddering breath, Diana stepped forward and knelt before the urn. She closed her eyes, letting the silence fill her, and began to speak in a quavering tone. "I confess my own mistakes. Moments when fear silenced me and guilt held me prisoner. I too have haunted memories that I've kept locked away. I offer them now along with the tears I've borne in hopes that the sorrow ends here." Her words rang out, raw and unguarded, mingling with the collective grief of the chamber. At that moment, The temperature in the room seemed to rise, and the oppressive weight lifted imperceptibly, as if the very manor were exhaling after a long, painful breath. The urn vibrated softly in Diana's grasp, a resonant hum that spoke of ancient forgiveness. One by one, the spectral faces that had hovered in the shadows began to dissolve, their anguished cries softening into a murmur of release. Evelyn's ghost, bathed in a gentle, ethereal glow, looked on with tears streaming down her translucent face. "Thank you," the spirit whispered, her voice now filled with fragile hope. "Your courage has opened a path to redemption." As the echoes of Diana's confession dwindled, Mark and Elliot joined in their own revelations. Mark, with a steady yet pained voice, recounting his unspoken failures to protect those he loved, and Elliot, his skepticism giving way to a somber acknowledgement of the guilt he had long buried under reason. Their confessions, individually tender and collectively cathartic, resonated with the mournful history of Blackwood Manor. In that silent, hallowed moment, the walls of the hidden chamber seemed to shimmer with the light of absolution. The urn slowly began to glow, its etched runes pulsing like the steady heartbeat of a living being, as if accepting the burdens laid before it. The voices of the lost, once a relentless cacophony of despair, faded into a single harmonious murmur, a lullaby of forgiveness that wrapped itself gently around the trio and the spirit of Evelyn. Outside, the first hints of dawn began to seep through the warped windows of Blackwood Manor, the gray light softening the night's terrors. Mark, Diana, and Elliot emerged from the manor changed. Haunted, yes, but free, if only in part, from the chains of regret that had defined the cursed house for so long. They carried with them the memory of what had transpired in those depths, a reminder that sometimes the bravest act is to confront the darkness that lies hidden within. In the weeks that followed, Mark compiled his findings into a detailed account of Blackwood Manor's grim history. His manuscript, filled with the voices of the lost and the confessions that broke centuries of curse, stirred controversy and empathy in equal measure among scholars and locals alike. Diana, forever touched by the sorrow and redemption that had unfolded that night, dedicated herself to helping others acknowledge their own hidden griefs. Elliot's footage, raw and unedited, circulated as both a testament to what lies beyond the rational mind and a warning of the price of unrepented sins. Though Blackwood Manor continued to stand as a somber monument to centuries of pain, its haunted halls no longer echoed with the relentless cries of the damned. In its quiet, crumbling corridors, one could sometimes hear the faintest strains of a lullaby, a reminder that even in the darkest reaches of despair there exists a spark of forgiveness, waiting for the courage to be kindled. As autumn turned to winter and the land outside the manor was cloaked in frost, the story of that fateful night spread like a careful whisper among those who believed in the healing power of confronting one's past. And on quiet, snowy evenings, when the wind moaned through the barren trees, some swore they could glimpse a gentle light in the window of Blackwood Manor, a light that signified that, even for the most tormented souls, there might be hope, if only they were brave enough to confess their regrets.
Story number 8.
In a city where neon lights masked ancient secrets and the hum of urban life drowned out whispers from the past, an abandoned subway station lay hidden beneath layers of concrete and time. Most had forgotten that it existed, a relic of a bygone era when the city's underbelly pulsed with life and mystery. Tonight, however, its long-sealed corridors would awaken and reveal a story steeped in despair and dread. Liam Torres, a veteran subway maintenance worker known for his stoic demeanor, had been summoned unexpectedly during a late-night shift. A flickering monitor in the operations room had registered an unexplained surge from Tunnel 9, a passage long closed after an unexplained incident decades ago. Liam's blood ran cold as he remembered the forbidden legends whispered among his colleagues, a place said to be cursed by the souls of those left behind, their wails echoing in the darkness. With little choice but to investigate, he grabbed his heavy flashlight and toolkit and made his way to a hidden service hatch far from prying eyes. As Liam pried the rusted door open, a chill wind burst forth, carrying with it a musty, metallic odor reminiscent of decay and despair. Descending a narrow set of stairs that led deep beneath the bustle of modern trains, he entered a station that time had nearly forgotten. The walls were adorned with peeling advertisements from a half-century past, and the platform's tiled floor was streaked with layers of grime. Broken glass and scattered debris formed a grim mosaic reflecting the pale beam of his flashlight. Every step he took echoed, a morose counterpoint to the silent testimony of this forsaken place. "Hello?" Liam's voice resonated, sounding strangely small against the cavernous dark. At first, only his echo replied. Then, distant and indistinct, came a low moan, as if the station itself were trying to speak a language of sorrow. Unbeknownst to Liam, his investigation was not a solitary venture. Sarah Milton, a young urban explorer with a penchant for documenting forgotten histories, had long been intrigued by the rumors that clung to Tunnel 9. She had followed clues on obscure blogs and tips off sympathetic insiders, determined to capture evidence of something that defied rational explanation. Tonight, fate had aligned her path with that of the solitary worker. As she crept through a side corridor leading to the same subterranean world, her camera's red recording light blinked steadily in the darkness. Liam paused by a faded, cracked mosaic on the wall, depicting a smiling family once meant to herald progress in a hopeful city. The image now looked hauntingly incongruous against the oppressive aura of neglect and sorrow. He murmured to himself, "What happened here?" The unanswered question hung heavy in the stagnant air. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye, a shadow darting just beyond the reach of the beam. He spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing except endless darkness. Before he could force himself to dismiss it as a trick of his imagination, a disembodied whisper slid along the corridor, soft yet insistent. "Remember us," it breathed, each syllable trembling like the dying echo of a lament. Liam's throat tightened. With every instinct screaming to retreat, he advanced cautiously, determined to uncover the source of the sound. In a narrow, arching passage flanked by pillars bearing cryptic graffiti, names and dates intertwined with somber symbols, Sarah appeared, illuminated briefly by the intermittent glow of her camera screen. Liam startled at her unexpected presence. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice a mix of suspicion and guarded relief. Sarah's eyes, wide with both excitement and palpable fear, met his. "I'm Sarah," she replied softly, raising her camera in a gesture of goodwill. "I've been investigating Tunnel 9 for months. I didn't think anyone was still down here." Liam's face softened, the initial tension giving way to cautious collaboration. "I'm Liam. I'm here because the control center picked up an anomaly. This place isn't supposed to be active. I've been down many times, but never like this. There's something off." The two continued together, their voices echoing against tiled walls as they navigated the twisted corridors of the abandoned station. Their footsteps grew quieter as they approached a wide open platform, unlike any other section of Tunnel 9 that Liam recalled from decades past. Here, the air was unnaturally still, and the oppressive silence was punctuated by the low hum of something beyond human understanding. Liam's flashlight beam revealed an ornate, wrought iron bench covered in dust. Carved onto it were words too faded to make out completely. A prayer or a farewell, perhaps. Sarah, fascinated by the inscription, leaned in to document it. As she steadied her camera, the whisper returned, clearer this time. "Forgive us." The hairs on Liam's neck stood on end. "Did you hear that?" he asked, glancing at Sarah, whose face had turned pale. She nodded, unable to tear her eyes from the bench. At that instant, the temperature plummeted further. The air around them rippled as if stirred by an unseen force. Out of the gloom emerged a figure, a woman clad in tattered clothing, her face a mask of sorrow, her eyes wide pools of grief. Her form was translucent, shimmering against the drab background of the deserted station. Her lips moved as if to speak, but what emerged was a symphony of broken voices. "We were forgotten, left in the dark." Sarah's camera captured the spectral figure, its lens focused on an image that defied conventional explanation. Liam's hand shook as he steadied himself against the cold wall. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. The ghostly woman's gaze swept over them, her eyes filled with boundless agony and regret. "I am Marianne," she whispered, her voice echoing as if carried by the winds of sorrow from another time. "I, along with my family and countless others, were abandoned here when the city turned its back. Our voices were silenced, our memories lost in the din of progress. Now we remain, imprisoned in the shadows beneath your world." A sudden gust of air, as though exhaled by the very soul of the station, rattled the antiquated signage overhead and sent loose papers skittering across the floor. Marianne's figure wavered and then expanded, as if drawing power from the lingering echoes of despair. Help us to remember, like she pleaded. Only when our story is told can we be free. Liam exchanged a troubled glance with Sarah. How do we help you? He asked, his tone both empathetic and filled with dread at the unearthly request. The specter's hollow eyes met his. Your acknowledgement, your remembrance. The curse that binds us is fueled by oblivion. We are doomed to be mere shadows unless the truth is reclaimed. Our history, our pain, our legacy. Then the darkness may lift. As Marianne's voice tapered off into an agonized wail that reverberated through the platform, the walls themselves seemed to come alive with fragments of the past. In the flickering glow of their flashlights, the pair began to see brief apparitions manifesting from the darkness. Figures of men, women, and children, each caught in a moment of indescribable terror and despair. In a near-silent ballet of anguish, these lost souls drifted, their eyes imploring for rescue from their eternal confinement. Determined to honor their plea, Liam and Sarah withdrew to the relative safety of an adjoining maintenance corridor. There, amid rusted pipes and forgotten control panels, they huddled together to piece together the mystery. Sarah played back the footage on her camera, watching in disbelief as the ghostly figures flitted in and out of view. In the grainy recording, amidst the soft pleas and sorrowful whispers, a message began to emerge, a pattern of numbers etched into a wall near the central platform. It read, 1947, the year when, according to old municipal records, a catastrophic accident had occurred in Tunnel 9. A malfunctioning train had derailed, trapping dozens of workers and commuters deep beneath the city, their bodies never recovered, and their names lost in time. Liam's eyes widened in understanding. That's it, he murmured. They were sacrificed in an accident, a tragedy covered up by the city to preserve its image. Their final moments, their unavenged grief, have kept them here. Marianne was one of them, a mother, a sister, and now all of them remain as echoes of an injustice. The truth, bitter and undeniable, sent shivers down their spines. With trembling determination, Liam resolved to set in motion a plan to reveal the forgotten tragedy. We need to bring this to light, he said, his voice steadying as he found purpose. Document everything we have seen, gather the records and tell their story. Only then can they be remembered, and free us all from this curse. Sarah, though still visibly shaken, nodded in agreement. The world needs to know what happened here, what they endured. I'll upload the footage, share the story. We can't let their voices fade into oblivion. Before they could retrace their steps back to the surface, Marianne's plaintive form reappeared, this time nearer and more anguished than before. Thank you, the spectral figure whispered, her tone imbued with both gratitude and sorrow. But be warned, once the truth is unleashed, the darkness may seek to reclaim its power. The city has forgotten, and with every passing day, our torment deepens. You must be brave, or else our tragedy will swallow the world anew. Liam swallowed hard, his resolve hardening. We have no choice, he replied softly. Your truth is a burden we must all bear. We will not let your memory be lost again. With those words echoing through the abandoned station, he and Sarah set off back through the labyrinthine corridors, each step a defiant act against the long-forgotten injustice. Up above, the city remained oblivious to the turmoil churning beneath its foundations. Yet as the first hints of dawn struggled through the urban haze, Liam and Sarah emerged from Tunnel 9, forever changed. Every time the city's humming streets resonated with the clatter of daily life, the whispers of the lost, of Marianne, of all the trapped souls, would murmur quietly at the edges of their reality. In the weeks that followed, the evidence Liam and Sarah painstakingly collected sparked a public outcry and a long overdue investigation into the disaster of 1947. Investigative reporters, historians, and even former workers came forward with their own tales of the haunted tunnels, forming a chorus of remembrance that finally cast light upon the darkness that had long festered below. The hidden station was sealed permanently afterward, not as a prison for restless ghosts, but as a memorial, a monument to the lives lost and the sorrow that had bound them. Though the spectral figures faded from public view, on solitary nights when the city's pulse slowed and the subway ran on empty tracks, some swore they heard gentle, sorrowful humming beneath the pavement, a testament to a tragedy remembered and a promise that the voices of the forgotten would echo on, borne by those brave enough to stand against oblivion.
Story number 9.
In the dead of autumn, when the harvest moon rose fat and swollen above fields of withered corn stalks, the old county road took on an otherworldly hue. Down this lonely stretch, pocked by potholes and flanked by parched, rusted fences, there lay the forgotten hamlet of Pinecross, a place where time itself had been swallowed by endless nights and whispered regrets. Got it. If you're in the mood for more stories like this, feel free to let me know. Rumors flew that an apparition in the shape of a scarecrow stalked the fields, and that its eyes, burning like coals, were fixed upon its next victim. Although Elena was a pragmatist at heart, the desperation in the villagers' eyes and the eerie constellations of unexplained evidence compelled her to pay a visit to this remote community. Under an overcast sky that seemed to mourn lost souls, Elena arrived at the weathered sheriff's station. The building, a squat structure with flaking paint and sagging porches, looked more like a relic than a hub of law enforcement. Inside, she was greeted by Sheriff Caleb Dunn, a gruff man whose lined face and tired eyes bore the weight of decades fighting darkness in a town where nightmares were as common as dust. "They've all gone missing, Detective," Sheriff Dunn said in a gravelly voice as he led her through a narrow corridor decorated with faded wanted posters and sepia-toned photographs of long-departed families. "You might not like this, but there's talk of the harvester. Folks here believe it's real." Elena studied him carefully. "I've heard the stories, Caleb, but you know I need something more concrete than local superstition." Yet even as she spoke, a chill that wasn't entirely due to the autumn air crept up her spine. Later that evening, as dusk bled into inky darkness, Elena joined a small investigative team on an expedition to trace the patterns of the disappearances. Alongside her were Marcus Reed, an earnest journalist whose determination to uncover the truth had driven him away from the safe confines of the city, and Billy Buck Harper, a local farmer with sun-beaten skin and eyes that held both wisdom and sorrow. Buck had been a lifetime resident of Pinecross and had seen many seasons, though nothing like the terror that now haunted the land. The trio began their investigation on the main road at the edge of the hamlet. The fields that stretched out before them were a patchwork of brown and gray, interspersed with skeletal remains of corn stalks swaying in the chill breeze. In the distance loomed an old barn, its silhouette distorted by the wan light of a bruised moon. According to local lore, this barn had once belonged to the Hargrave family, whose tragic end had become inseparable from the curse. Stories said that, on certain nights, a spectral figure could be seen among the stacks of rotting hay, its head crowned by a tattered hat that resembled a scarecrow's, its face hidden beneath a shroud of shadow. As they approached the barn, Buck slowed his rusty pickup truck to a crawl. "I remember when that place was the heart of the harvest, when music, laughter, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. But now it's just cursed wood and haunted memories," he murmured, his voice heavy with regret. Marcus, ever the recorder of human emotion, was scribbling notes in his battered journal. "Buck," he asked, "did you ever hear what they say about what happens inside the barn on a harvest night?" Buck's eyes shifted uneasily to the vast, broken structure looming ahead. "They say," he whispered, "that when the wind howls and the moon is just right, you can hear the silent song of the harvester. They claim it comes for souls, taking them away to join the lost. Not in a violent way, but with a quiet inevitability, as if it were simply fulfilling a grim duty." Elena frowned. She was a detective, and evidence mattered more to her than superstition. Yet the raw fear in Buck's tone and the haunted expressions of the townspeople gnawed at her reason. "We need to see for ourselves," she said, determination lacing her voice. "Let's begin inside the barn." Armed with flashlights that cut through the darkness like fragile beacons, the three entered the barn's cavernous interior. The smell of damp wood and old, decaying hay overwhelmed them. Dust motes notes danced like miniature specters in the pale beams of light, and the silence was as thick as the layers of neglect that shrouded every surface. They searched carefully, stepping around scattered tools and broken equipment. In one corner, Marcus's light fell upon something unexpected, an array of old photographs, yellowed with time, pinned to a makeshift bulletin board. The images depicted smiling families gathered in front of the barn, proud and hopeful. But behind each photograph, barely discernible in the dim light, was a smear of something dark, as if tears of blood had marked the scene. Marcus's hand trembled as he held up one photo. Look at this, he said softly. It's like the image is trying to tell us something. Before Elena could respond, a sound so soft it might have been mistaken for the rustle of the wind echoed across the vast room. It was a low, mournful hum, as if sung by 1,000 grieving voices. The sound seemed to emanate from deeper within the barn, drawing them further into its heart. Someone or something is here with us, Elena stated coolly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of unease. Stay alert. They advanced down a narrow aisle between rows of old farming equipment. With every step, the hum grew louder, interspersed with intermittent whispers that might have been voices from the past or the product of their overactive imaginations. Suddenly, a gust of chilly wind burst through a broken window, scattering loose paper and filling the barn with the scent of earth and decay. In that moment, a large, shadowy figure appeared at the far end of the aisle, a silhouette fashioned against the faint glow of the moon filtering through the opening. The figure was dressed in ragged clothes and a floppy hat, its limbs unnaturally elongated. For a heartbeat, time seemed to slow as the figure stepped forward, revealing eyes that glinted with an otherworldly luminescence. The Harvester. Marcus's voice caught in his throat. It can't be, he stammered. The specter's presence was both mesmerizing and horrifying. Its lips moved in a silent cadence, and in a voice that resonated with the pain of lost souls, it said, "Your hearts are full of remembrance, yet your souls remain blind. I come not to harm, but to claim what has been forgotten." Elena stepped forward, her hand hovering near her holstered service weapon, a token of rationality against the encroaching madness. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice steady, though her heart pounded with the knowledge that no rational explanation could account for what they beheld. The creature tilted its head, and its voice, now echoing around them, replied, in tones layered with despair and dark longing. "I am the Harvester, binder of memories, collector of the quiet. I bring the lost home, to where the sorrow can be sung and the burden of oblivion be lifted." Buck's eyes filled with a pained mixture of recognition and terror. "I've heard the tales, but I never thought." His voice trailed off as the apparition drifted closer. The Harvester moved with a languid grace, its feet barely disturbing the dust. "I claim the grief of each abandoned soul," it murmured, as though reciting a mournful litany. "And tonight, as the harvest moon witnesses your deeds, your truths shall be laid bare." The words echoed down the rotting beams of the barn, each syllable a dagger of melancholy and dread. Marcus, compelled by equal measures of terror and journalistic fervor, reached for his camera. "What do you want from us?" he asked, voice trembling yet insistent. The spectral figure's eyes flashed with a sorrow as profound as the abyss. "I seek only remembrance," it intoned. "For every lost life, for every suppressed truth, there must be penance and reconciliation. You, who walk among the living, must bear witness and carry forth our story. Confess your own secrets of regret and guilt. Only then can the cycle be broken and our eternal wandering come to an end." Elena felt the weight of those words settle upon her like a curse. The notion that their personal histories might be intertwined with this spectral reclamation was both nauseating and inevitable. "You're saying that if we share our truth," she began haltingly, "you will release you and maybe even stop the disappearances?" The Harvester's features softened, the gaunt figure almost seeming to weep in the dim light. "The lost are many, and their voices have been drowned by silence and shame. To acknowledge them, you must first acknowledge yourselves. The darkness you harbor unspoken, the sorrow you bury in the depths of your souls." For several long minutes, the only sound was the relentless hum of the wind and the distant creaking of rotted wood. Then, as if in response to the Harvester's lament, a scene unfolded outside the barn's broken windows. A montage of images that played out like a phantom slideshow across the night sky. Families torn apart by secrets, moments of quiet despair at the loss of loved ones, and individuals whose hearts had been hardened by guilt and regrets. The images were as vivid as they were harrowing, and each carried the silent testimony of a spirit forgotten. Moved despite themselves, the trio exchanged glances. Marcus, whose career had been built on the pursuit of truth, swallowed hard. I lost my brother," he confessed suddenly, voice raw and unsteady. "He died in an accident I could have prevented. I never forgave myself." His admission hung in the chilled air like a benediction and a curse all at once. Buck's rough hands clenched at the hem of his weathered shirt. "I've carried the guilt of turning a blind eye to the suffering of my neighbors," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. I should have done more. I should have spoken out. Elena hesitated, the detective in her battling the urge to remain stoic, yet with a deep, shuddering breath, she joined in. I kept silent about corruption in my department, secrets that cost people their lives, she admitted. I thought I was protecting my community, but I was wrong. The harvester's form seemed to waver with an almost imperceptible smile, a sorrowful benediction bestowed upon these fragile souls for shedding their burdens. In your confession lies healing, it whispered, its voice the susurrus of winds over barren fields. The darkness that has claimed these lives is a mirror to the unspoken torment within each of you. By speaking your truth, you illuminate the path for those who have been cast aside. As the trio's admissions echoed into the empty spaces of the barn, the oppressive air lightened ever so slightly. The haunting melody that had been so prevalent in the background changed timbre, transforming from a dirge of despair into a soft elegiac hymn. The spectral forms that had haunted the periphery of their vision began to dissipate, their anguished cries replaced by murmurs of gratitude and a promise of rest. In a final act of solemn ritual, the harvester swept its bony hand across the barn's dusty floor, and from the scattered remnants of old photographs, faded letters, and broken relics, a gentle radiance emerged. It coalesced into a luminous pool, a mirror of memories freed from the shackles of regret. One by one, the spectral faces of the lost smiled, their mournful expressions easing into tranquil resignation as they dissolved into that radiant haze. For a long, breathless moment, silence reigned. Then, with the burden of confession lifted, the harvester spoke one final time. Go forth with our memory, and do not let darkness fall again upon the unspoken. Remember, and in remembrance, find redemption. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of gray and rose, Marcus, Buck, and Elena emerged from the barn forever changed. They carried within them the weight of both sorrow and hope, a promise that, by bearing witness to both the horrors and the secrets of the past, a future free from the curse might yet be born. In the days and months that followed, Marcus's articles, Buck's heartfelt confessions to the community, and Elena's relentless pursuit of truth sparked a quiet revolution in Pine Cross. The disappearances stopped, and the once muted voices of the lost found their echo in the healing power of remembrance. Though the specter of the harvester became a whispered legend, a ghost story told around flickering fires, the truth of that autumn night endured as a testament to the transformative power of confession and the relentless human drive to reclaim hope from the jaws of despair. And on moonlit nights, when the wind was low and the fields whispered of old regrets, some swore that a gentle melody could still be heard drifting over the corn rows, a lullaby of redemption, urging all who listened never to let the darkness bury the truth again.
Story number 10.
In the barren reaches of autumn's chill, Hawthorne Academy loomed like an ancient specter against a slate-gray sky. Far from the bustling cities and hidden among windswept pines, the boarding school had stood for nearly a century, a place of severe tradition and whispered secrets. Its ivy-clad stone walls had absorbed decades of sorrow and mystery, and as the leaves turned brittle and auburn, an unease crept through the corridors where laughter and scholarly debate had once reigned. Marianne Cole, a seasoned English teacher with kind eyes hardened by loss, had dedicated her life to nurturing young minds at Hawthorne. Yet over the past few months, the academy had been shaken by a series of inexplicable disappearances. It began with the sudden vanishing of a promising student, Jonathan Pierce, a quiet boy known for his gentle smile and remarkable talent for poetry. Then, as hushed rumors swirled through the cloistered halls, another student and even a few staff members began to vanish without a trace. Parents, local authorities, and even the headmaster, Mr. Alistair Hawthorne himself, had been unable to offer a convincing explanation. Whispers spoke of cursed legacies from the school's past, of an ancient presence that dwelled in its shadowed recesses, waiting for the stroke of midnight. It was on a rain-soaked October evening, when darkness pressed in like a living thing, that Marianne resolved to uncover the truth. Late after classes had ended and the corridors lay silent, she gathered her resolve and made her way to the library, a cavernous room lined with towering oak shelves and illuminated only by flickering gas lamps. Within these stacks of leather-bound volumes and forgotten manuscripts, she hoped to find a key to the Academy's long-buried history. As she pushed open the heavy door, its creak echoing like a lament, Marianne couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes watched her every move. The musty scent of aged paper and dust mingled with something bittersweet, a perfume of grief and decay. Near a corner desk lay an antique ledger, its cover embossed with the Academy's crest, a raven perched on a twisted branch. With trembling fingers, Marianne began to leaf through the pages. In faded ink, entries chronicled strange occurrences dating back generations, unexplained absences, eerie shadows drifting past windows at midnight, and accounts of ghostly figures in empty hallways. One passage in particular made her heart pound. On All Souls' Eve, when the clock strikes 12, the guardian of lost voices shall come, and the halls will echo with the grief of those forgotten. A frisson of dread and determination gripped Marianne. Had this guardian been responsible for the recent disappearances? What secrets did Hawthorne Academy conceal within its ancient walls? Determined to know more, Marianne sought out a trusted confidant, Nathaniel Price, the Academy's quiet caretaker, with eyes that had seen more than he ever spoke of. Late that night, beneath a muted sky smeared with rain and sorrow, Marianne found Nathaniel alone in a dim corridor near the aging boiler room. "Nathaniel," she said in a hushed voice, "I've been reading through old records. There are accounts from long ago about a presence, a guardian, haunting these halls on the night of All Souls' Eve. Do you know anything of this?" Nathaniel's gaze flickered with a grief he never revealed. "Aye, Miss Cole," he murmured, his voice rasped by years of solitude. "There's a tale among us keepers that on the darkest night, the Academy calls out to its lost children. They say the spirit of a woman, once a teacher here, betrayed and silenced by scandal and tragedy, is cursed to roam these corridors, gathering sorrow and reclaiming the voices of those who fade away." Marianne's breath caught in her throat. "A teacher?" she whispered, horrified to think that this spectral presence might have borne the same passion for knowledge as her own. Nathaniel nodded solemnly. Miss Evelyn Blackwood was her name. In the late 1920s, she was accused of a terrible crime, a betrayal that cost a student's life and shattered her own spirit. Though never proven guilty, the scandal ruined her career and her soul. Some say she was condemned by the very halls she once cherished, cursed to wander this place for eternity. Before Marianne could press for more, a distant tolling of a clock reverberated through the empty halls, its sound both mournful and foreboding. 12, Nathaniel whispered, eyes downcast. "It seems the hour draws near." Marianne felt her resolve harden. "I must see it for myself," she declared. "I will stand vigil tonight and confront whatever lingers in these shadows." As midnight approached, the storm outside intensified. The Academy was shrouded in a ghostly gloom as Marianne made her way through silent corridors and expansive foyers. Her footsteps echoed against polished marble floors that bore the patina of years gone by. In a quiet atrium, under the watchful gaze of carved stone gargoyles, Marianne found a vantage point from which she could observe the central clock, a massive timepiece mounted above the grand staircase, its pendulum swinging like the heartbeat of the ancient building. With the precision of a seasoned detective, Marianne settled into an alcove behind a tall bookcase. She waited as the minutes ticked away, each one resonating with the weight of expectation. Every creak and whisper from the darkened passageways set her nerves on edge. She clutched an old journal and a pen, a tangible link to reality in a realm that seemed to float between memory and nightmare. At precisely midnight, the clock's chimes began, a sonorous cadence that vibrated through the very foundations of Hawthorne Academy. As the final toll echoed, a strange hush fell over the corridors. Marianne's heart hammered in her chest, and in the silence that followed, a soft, almost imperceptible sound emerged, a lament like a sigh carried on the wind. From the far end of the corridor, a figure materialized. At first, it was only a faint silhouette, a woman in a flowing, tattered gown, her face obscured by shadow, moving slowly as though drawn by an invisible force. As the figure drew nearer, Marianne could see the pallor of her skin, the deep sorrow etched into every line of her face, and eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. It was Miss Evelyn Blackwood. Who are you?" Marianne called, voice trembling between fear and compassion. The ghost's eyes met Marianne's, and in a voice that seemed to echo from a distant past, she replied, "I am Evelyn. I have been forgotten, cast aside with the hopes and dreams of those who once walked these halls. I come now to gather the voices of the lost, to reclaim the pain that binds us all." Marianne's instincts urged her to flee, but her heart, fierce in its empathy, demanded answers. "What do you want from us?" she asked softly. "What sorrow do you seek to ease?" Evelyn's transparent form glided closer, almost floating above the cold floor. "Long ago," she began, "I was a teacher entrusted with the light of knowledge and the hope of future generations. But betrayal shattered that light. I was accused of a sin I did not commit, cast out in shame, and confined to these walls by a curse born of grief and injustice. Over time, the anguish of those lost here, those whose lives ended too soon, whose voices were silenced, merged with mine. I became the guardian of sorrow, a wraith compelled to remind the living of the price of silence." A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, extinguishing several lamps and plunging portions of the corridor into near darkness. Marianne's pulse raced as she clutched her journal. I understand loss," she stammered, trying to bridge the gap between her mortal pain and the spectral torment before her. "But these disappearances, do they bear a purpose?" Evelyn's eyes flickered with an indescribable mixture of anguish and resignation. "When the living forget to remember the past, its curses grow unchecked," she murmured. "Each soul that vanishes, each memory that is suppressed, feeds the darkness. I come on this night to reclaim what was lost, and perhaps in doing so, set our tormented fates free." As Evelyn's voice faded, a series of haunting sounds emanated from the walls, whispers of frightened laughter, the clatter of unseen footsteps, and the soft weeping of souls long consigned to oblivion. Marianne realized with a chill that the academy itself was alive with grief, its history and heartbreak woven into every crevice. Determined to break the cycle, Marianne rose from her hiding place. "I will not let you or the forgotten suffer in silence any longer," she declared, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. "Teach me your truth. Let me bring justice or solace to these lost voices." For a long moment, the spectral figure regarded her, as though weighing the sincerity of her words. Then, with a graceful, sorrowful nod, Evelyn extended a hand. "Follow me," she whispered, "and remember that the past is never truly dead. It lingers in the echoes of our mistakes. Only by acknowledging it can we hope to change our future." Marianne followed as Evelyn led her down a narrow corridor to a neglected wing of the academy, rarely trodden by the living. The air grew colder with each step, and the walls seemed to close in, revealing a tapestry of faded portraits and stained banners chronicling the Academy's once proud history. In a dust-laden room at the wing's end, Marianne discovered a large, ornate mirror propped up against a wall. Its surface, though marred by age, was clear enough to reveal a scene not of the present, but of a long-ago tragedy. As Marianne peered into the mirror, the reflection shifted and coalesced into an image of a brightly lit classroom from decades past. Children sat at wooden desks, and at the front, a stern woman with kind eyes, Evelyn Blackwood in her living days, stood before them. The image rippled with the passing of time, then shattered like glass, revealing glimpses of violence and despair. A classroom in chaos, a scandal unfolding with whispered accusations, and a fateful confrontation that ended in irreparable loss. Marianne's heart pounded as she realized that the mirror was not merely reflecting the past. It was a conduit through which the Academy's darkest secrets had been seeping into the present. Every unspoken injustice, every concealed sorrow, has given birth to these disappearances. Evelyn's voice resonated softly behind her. The mirror holds the true story, a confession of sins that were never fully atoned for. Only by confronting it can we begin to mend the broken ties between past and present. Marianne stepped closer to the mirror, her eyes fixated on the flickering images. With a deep breath, she whispered, I remember. I remember the promises we make to never let the past fade into darkness." The words seemed to reverberate in the silent room, infusing it with a fragile glimmer of hope. Slowly, as if guided by Marianne's determination, the images in the mirror settled into a single, coherent vision, a reenactment of that fateful night when secrets and lies conspired to cast a long shadow over the Academy. The vision revealed a confrontation between a respected member of the faculty and enraged parent whose child had suffered due to negligence. Harsh words escalated into violence. In the ensuing chaos, an innocent student was caught in the crossfire, and though no one admitted guilt, the burden of responsibility fell silently upon all who remained. The mirror's silent testimony bore the weight of unconfessed remorse. Tears welled in Marianne's eyes as she absorbed the tragic clarity of the vision. "This is why the curse endures," she murmured, because the truth was buried under layers of pride and fear until no one dared to speak of it. Evelyn's ghost hovered close, her eyes reflecting centuries of sorrow and reluctant forgiveness. "The Academy is a mausoleum of unspoken remorse," she said softly. "It is time for you to share this truth with the living. Only then can the cycle be broken." Marianne gathered her courage and stepped out of the shadowed wing, determined to bring the untold story into the light. In the days that followed, she confronted Mr. Hawthorne in his candlelit office, laid out the uncovered evidence in hushed meetings with fellow staff, and reached out to the families of the disappeared. Slowly, a movement grew, a reckoning that acknowledged the Academy's sins and the pain it had inflicted on generations. News of the revelations spread throughout the small community. Former students, their memories haunted by echoes of that long-forgotten night, began to speak up. Public apologies were issued, and a memorial was established in honor of those whose voices had been silenced. In time, the oppressive atmosphere that had gripped Hawthorne Academy began to lift, replaced by a fragile hope that truth, no matter how bitter, could mend even the deepest of wounds. Late one quiet evening, as Marianne walked alone past the once forbidding building, she paused before the grand entrance. In the reflection of the polished glass doors, she thought she saw a fleeting figure, a woman in a faded gown, her eyes soft and grateful. For a single, trembling moment, Marianne smiled, knowing that Evelyn Blackwood and the countless lost voices had finally been heard. The curse that had once condemned Hawthorne Academy slowly receded like a tide, leaving in its wake not a ghostly realm of endless torment, but a memory of sorrow transformed into reconciliation. And though the building still stood, its weathered facade a testament to years of hardship, the echoes of its tragic past now served as a somber reminder that only by remembering and confessing can the wounds of history be healed.